All right. Good morning. Welcome folks here live at the Golden Valley Country Club, also online. Welcome to the 4th annual 2021 East Metro Development Summit. First and foremost, excuse me, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Washington County CDA, Greater St. Paul BOMA, Great River Energy, Whipfly, and Bridgewater Bank. Without these folks, we couldn't put on these events, so let's give them a round of applause, and also online. All right, now on to our first panel. This will start our CE portion for the event. This event has been approved for 4 hours of real estate continuing education credits by the Minnesota Department of Commerce. Folks here live and in virtual, you must sign in, sign out. Well, virtual, you just log in, and people here, you actually sign. So folks here live, sign in, sign out. Make sure we have your correct real estate license number. For folks, for virtual folks, you're going to have 2 questions per hour on the online chat, and you just have to answer them and respond to those, and you will be good to go. That will be your sign-ins and sign-outs, so 2 per hour. So with that, it's my privilege to introduce the first moderator of the session, East Metro State of the Market. Good friend of mine, Washington County CDA, Chris Eng.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Jay. It's good to see everybody in here, and welcome to those of you who are watching online. We're glad you could join us this morning. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to come and learn a little bit more about East Metro. And we'll talk a little bit about what's happening on the east side, and some of our community partners here, and some of our development partners are here. Our electrical energy providers are here as well to talk to you about some of the projects, and we're pretty excited about some of the things that are happening today. And if nothing else, we want you to know that we were here to make connections today. We want to meet with you. We want to talk with you about what is happening on the east side, the East Metro, and then look for opportunities to partner on projects going forward. So with that, Jay, if you don't mind starting the slideshow, I'll give a little bit of an overview about Washington County first, and then I'll turn it over to Eric Johnson from Oak Park Heights to talk about what's happening in Oak Park Heights. While he's doing that, I can talk a little bit about Washington County. Some of you may know that a lot of site selectors and commercial realtors refer to Washington County as East Metro, and we truly do cover the entire east side of the metro area. Washington County is 41 miles long, starting with Forest Lake and Hugo on the north. In the center, we've got Stillwater, Oak Park Heights, Lake Elmo, Oakdale, Woodbury, and on the southern border, Cottage Grove. And so we do cover quite a length of the East Metro. And we are the 3rd fastest growing county in the state of Minnesota. And we also have the 3rd lowest property taxes in the state of Minnesota. So those are pretty impressive statistics that I wanted to share with you, and something that we're pretty proud about in the county as well. Jay, can you pull up the, I'm sorry? You're good, I just can't get full screen yet. Nope, you want to start with the Washington County? Oh, yes. Yep. We'll pull up the slideshow so you can kind of see the map of the county. There we go. Thank you, Jay. Okay. And let's see. All right, I don't have access to advance it. Really? There it goes. Okay. So Washington County, we do take pride in the fact that we're close and connected, and we have a highly educated talent pool. We like to say that Washington County has talent, and you can see from the information on this slide here that 43% of all of our residents have college degrees and college education. And we also have a significant number of out commuters. The statistic was provided, thank you, Jay, pre-pandemic. And we actually had over 100,000 people that live in Washington County that commute outside of the county to work every day. And of course, now those folks, many of them are working remotely at home. And so we do think there are opportunities for available talent. And I know that is a common concern when a company is selecting a location, can they find the talent pool? And we think that we have that available in Washington County. We're going to talk a lot about talent today and our partnership with schools as we get through some of the slides today. We also are close and connected. We are in certain areas of the county, only 10 minutes away from downtown St. Paul and 15 minutes away from Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, with major transportation routes, including I-35, I-94, 494, 694, Highway 10, and Highway 61 that cover many, many parts of the county. So we are very proud of our transportation connections and the close proximity to downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul, which are just minutes from certain parts of the county. But one of the other things that we want to talk about, and we'll talk about this considerably today, is the amount of land that's available. You can find sites as small as 6 acres on a publicly owned site in the city of Newport to 300 acres of undeveloped land that's for sale and available in Forest Lake and other parts of the county. And so we're going to talk about some of those opportunities today, and certainly want to make connections with you to help bridge that gap to make sure that if you have a site that you're looking for, that we might be able to find a perfect fit for you no matter what you're looking for somewhere in the county. And so we'll certainly be glad to talk to you. And all of the panelists will be available not only during the intermissions here, but we'll stick around afterwards. If you want to talk with us individually, we'd really encourage that. We want to make those connections today as well. And one of the other things that I really would be remiss if I didn't mention is the stunning natural beauty of the county. You may be familiar with Stillwater and some of the river, the St. Croix River Valley areas, the communities along the river. But we also have a number of lakes. We have a number of trails, golf courses. No matter where you're at in the county, there's always something to do in terms of outdoor recreational activities. We love the fact that on a Wednesday afternoon at 4:30, you can be on the slopes. If you like to ski, we've got Afton Alps. If you like to ride bike, we've got many beautiful bike trails and many regional parks all throughout the county. We're pretty proud of those opportunities. And the communities themselves have a lot of character and a lot of beauty, natural beauty. And so we like to pride the fact that if you're, a company that's looking to attract talent and that talent wants something to do after work, we've got it right in our backyard. You don't have to go far for it. It's right in Washington County. This is kind of a snapshot of who we are. You'll actually see the lakes and the trails and the historic communities that I talked about. And this is who we're not. We're not a downtown Minneapolis. We don't want to be a downtown Minneapolis. We love the fact that we're different and we're not Anytown, USA. Washington County is unique, and there's so many unique communities that each have their own individual character, and we're proud of that. We're proud of the diversity of the natural beauty and the different communities in the county. You're going to see a lot of different examples of how we work together as partners with our communities throughout the day-to-day. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Eric Johnson, and Eric is going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in Oak Park Heights, and then Kristina Handt from the city of Lake Elmo will follow Eric. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Am I coming up there?
You don't have to. You can sit.
I'll come up there. The clicker? Hello, I'm Eric. I'm the city administrator, city of Oak Park Heights. I am not the classic economic development person that maybe your folks somewhere are used to or hearing. But I've been with Oak Park Heights for about 18 years. And so I kind of starting to understand where some of the goods and bad things are occurring. So it takes some time to figure some things out. But I wanted to start my comments by saying, working with Chris and Melissa and Washington County Economic Development, now through the Community Development Authority or agency, I don't know what they have really brought a presence to the county and brought together some of those resources that smaller cities like Oak Park Heights needs. I don't have an economic development staff. I don't have an ability to put together these comprehensive things all the time. But that said, improvements in Lake Elmo, improvements in Woodbury, Cottage Grove that bring good paying jobs to those cities benefit Oak Park Heights and our residents. I mean, we're a bedroom community, so those employment opportunities and those investments do help us, and that is also benefited by, I know, Karl and Kristina and Costello and Dan and my colleagues around. So all that nonsense aside, I'm going to only talk about one thing, and that's the Xcel Energy King plant. So hopefully I got the clicker working right. All right, let's see. Okay, so if you're at all familiar with the East Side Metro, as you come across the Hudson, how much time do I have? I got an hour. All right. Okay. So as you come across the Hudson Bridge heading west, if you look to the north, you'll see a great big smokestack. That's the Allen S. King plant. It basically looks like that.
Eric, can I ask you a quick favor? Can you talk into the microphone so that?
Sure, I'm sorry. So it basically looks like what you see on the screen. It's a 500 megawatt power generation facility coal site. And so you've seen a lot of these. It sits on 170 acres on the St. Croix River, which is a wild and scenic, federally designated, I'm getting all that sequence wrong, river. And Chris talked about natural beauty in our community, but that's certainly part of it. So again, the site itself is about 170 acres. If you're familiar with the St. Croix River Crossing Bridge, which sits just to the north of that plant, that is also in Oak Park Heights. And you can see the site. About a third of it, more or less, is a great big coal pile. And the coal that's burned comes out of Montana, the western states. And so they bring it in on rail, and ultimately it gets burned and it creates power for the metro region. It's added to the grid, what have you. Well, as we know, our energy companies are transitioning in their power creation capacities or capabilities to more sustainable or renewable energy. Xcel Energy is obviously part of that. I can't even see these grids myself here on the screen, but let's just say that by 2050, they hope to be fully renewable or carbon free. So what does that mean? That means they have to start eliminating their coal plants, including the Allen S. King plant. The early thought was that this would close in mid-2030, mid-2030s. Well, as part of their integrated resource plan, which they filed with the Public Utilities Commission, that was moved forward to 2028. So our city relies on this King plant for a big chunk of its tax base, roughly a third. So about $2 million a year comes from this plant to support Oak Park Heights and the things we need to do in our community. So this kind of shows a grid, a pie chart of where our tax levy comes from. So it's about a third commercial property, about a third residential property, and finally public utility. Now, if that chunk goes away, well, what the heck do we do? So we need to find a way to replace that revenue in some way, shape, or form. Oak Park Heights, because the King plant exists, we generally don't receive any state aid at all in fiscal disparities. And in fact, we contribute. We receive no local government aid. We receive no state aid for roads, what have you. So basically, it's your property taxes in Oak Park Heights if you live in our city. So as I said, we're going to need to replace that revenue. I don't know if he's not turning on me. Oh, so we've sought, we went way back. Okay, so we started talking with our legislators about how we replace these dollars, and it's going to be a trying to seek $1 million in local government aid, ensuring there's an abatement and a cleanup of the site. But the most important thing we're asking the legislature for is roughly $10 million. And what is that $10 million going to be used for? What we know at the site is right now there are no utilities down there. There is a single 4-inch sanitary force main. So if our city has a vision of redeveloping this site, into something, whether that's commercial, industrial, residential, a mixed use, whatever, somebody's going to want to flush a toilet somewhere down there, I would think, right? So we've got to get water and sewer down to the site. They have wells on the property and the single 4-inch force main. So we've undertaken a process to start developing those utility feasibility studies and also implement a community advisory panel, which was also sponsored by Washington County Development CDA to put that together. So we assembled community folks, city residents, Xcel Energy, you folks, businesses, the Wild and Scenic River type folks, DNR, our neighboring communities, to start thinking about what's the vision for this property. Again, it's 170 acres on a wild and scenic river. So we turn it over to our engineers and we say, well, how do I get utilities down there? So we start with the broad concept of plans and think about where does the sewer go, where does the water go, what have you. So in rough number, it's going to be about $10 million just to get utilities to that site. So I'll skip all this. We have our community process and what are the things we need to work through. But there are some facilities down there right now that we want to think about. Certainly the Wild and Scenic River, talking about natural beauty. If you've ever been on the river or haven't been on the river, get out there and check it out. It's a great place to boat and just walk up and down. The city of Bayport, our neighbor, city of Stillwater, our neighbor, all have wonderful parks and trail systems along it. So we're no different. But that said, our city doesn't have a specific vision of this, and that's part of what that advisory panel is looking for, is what would best fit our community. Now, I think some people would say, well, it should all be converted back to, some wild and natural state and restore the riverway. And that, I think, is going to be absolutely part of it. But at 170 acres, we think there's room for everything. I mentioned that the King plant is a coal facility. And so we know, I'm going to go missing a map. So we know there's rail there. And how can that be saved or reutilized? There are barge capacities up and down the river that they used to bring the coal to the King plant there. And so that's a possibility. There are cooling towers there that maybe can be remaining, not the big tall stack, but you see where it says plant just below. I mean, that's where they cool the water that went through the boilers, what have you. So can those be reutilized for an industrial purpose? We don't know. But 2028 is going to come really fast. And what I would say to you folks, as you think about major sites in the metro, it's probably in the scale of the Ford plant site. 170 acres on the Wild and Scenic River has got room for almost anything. There is largely a blank slate what can be down there. So we don't have all the ideas. We don't have all the answers, but we know somebody's going to want to flush a toilet and somebody's going to want to turn the water on. So we're working on those core infrastructure pieces now. But as you folks think about your big sites and, hey, what's going on in the East Metro, Oak Park Heights is trying to redevelop 170 acres on the river. Right now, it's a blank slate. If you have ideas, if there's an overarching plan, some of our council members have even talked about, do we seek a master developer concept? Again, this is really early, but that's a possibility. So this is a 2028 timeline before they turn the switch off. And then there's a couple years of transition, but we're thinking about it now. So that's what I know. Any questions?
I have a question for
Yeah.
you, Eric. Have you guys begun any environmental work at all?
Well, there won't be any problems with that. No, Xcel Energy will likely always be the real estate owner. They're going to have to ensure that that site is remediated, brought to closure. And one of our legislative priorities is to ensure that happens within a reasonable timeline. So there could be, the worst thing that could happen would be that that site sits derelict, right? Not doing anything. And then we all sit and wonder, well, what's going on? No, that's not our goal. We want very specific things from Xcel Energy. And that said, Xcel Energy has been a great partner to date to get us to this point. And one more shot for Xcel Energy. To be fair, they have been great stewards of the Wild and Scenic River, the St. Croix River over decades. They've donated thousands of acres to that cause north of our city. So they have really taken that corporately to heart. And they've been great partners in our community advisory process too. So there'll be some cleanup, not to mention the 40-acre coal site, right? You know, that's 100 feet tall. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Todd, do we have any questions online, or will you let us know if there are questions from online? Appreciate that. Thank you. And what a great opportunity, Eric. Thank you for sharing that with us. And, you know, think along the lines of Canal Park, what in Duluth, what that was 20, 30 years ago. I mean, you had industrial development down in that area that is now something completely different. And I think there, at the end of the day, you're looking for ideas and connections, and let's just have the conversations. What could work there? And certainly as we go through the planning process, we'll make sure that we keep the development community up to date as well. But just as Eric mentioned, we're early on and just looking for ideas and partnerships right now. So thank you. Very good presentation.
So Chris and Eric, if you can use your supervision and read the question on the screen, otherwise I'll read it to you. Have you ever considered a sustainable utility on a site like the district energy system that could service whatever develops on the site?
Maybe that could be one great reuse. I don't know the market demand for that kind of unified energy delivery, like in St. Paul or Minneapolis. I think the overhead to probably do that would seem unreasonable. Not to mention, how are you going to get that fuel into it? That would be a truck-borne delivery system. I would speculate if it's a regional power source, probably would have some challenges, but I don't think our community is disregarded anything at this point.
There's an additional question. What is the sulfur content of the coal coming out of MT?
Well, I think it's higher than it used to be. I know it is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission and certainly their pollution control systems. They do capture, I think, most of, if not all of the pollutants that come out. In 2004, Xcel Energy undertook a major, I'm forgetting the title of what they called it, but they invested about $300 million in clean coal technology. So it was not a small project. So I would think that's going to be a small number. And I know different regions of the United States produce coal that have different sulfur content. I do know that it's Western States coal.
Okay, thank you for those questions, and we encourage those questions throughout the day as well. I'm going to next introduce Kristina Handt, who is the city administrator from Lake Elmo. And welcome, Kristina. We'd like to have you give us a little update on what's happening in Lake Elmo.
Thanks, Chris. And no flashy presentation from me today, but I'd invite anybody to come out and visit Lake Elmo so I can show you the beauty in person. The slides really wouldn't do it justice. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As Chris said, I'm Kristina Handt. I've been the administrator in Lake Elmo for about 5.5 years, which makes me the longest serving administrator in Lake Elmo this century. And so I hope that gives you an indication of how we've changed. You know, again, if you haven't been to Lake Elmo, lately, you really don't know Lake Elmo anymore. The population has increased by 50% in the last 5 years, as the city's approved 17 new housing developments, many of them with multiple phases. These developments have added just under 3,000 new units, and we now offer a variety of housing options, including single family, both the sewered and unsewered lots, townhomes, apartments, and multiple senior living facilities, offering a variety of continuum of care services. With the added homes, we've also seen growth in our commercial activities, especially in the finance, insurance, and medical industries. New small businesses have moved into our downtown area, where the community embraces them with special events and regular visits. We offer a variety of business opportunities, not only in the downtown, but along I-94 and most recently along our western border. When the city was developing their 2040 comprehensive plan, it was important that we adopted a plan that could respond to changes in the market. For this reason, we created new zoning districts along the I-94 corridor, such as the mixed-use business and mixed-use commercial districts. These districts are required to be at least 50% high-density residential, but it offers that flexibility if there's another use that the market's demanding. We also strive to strike the right balance of rural and urban areas in our community, so we can offer something for everyone. For that reason, sewered small lots are allowed in specific areas, while we retain larger lot developments throughout the rest of the city. We're blessed to be home to the Lake Elmo Park Preserve, 4 recreational lakes, and numerous trails and city parks, all of which provide a great quality of life that many residents and businesses are seeking. One of the exciting things that has come up this year is that we've begun now working with developers on 2 sizable industrial office warehousing projects that will add over 1 million square feet of industrial space to our city. One of them along Hudson Boulevard, a 30-acre parcel that will develop, will really start to expand the development opportunities along Hudson Boulevard, both to the east and west, as infrastructure investment is made there. The largest of the projects, though, is a 77-acre development along Ideal Avenue on the western side of the city. The city had acquired 180 acres in 2019 as part of a legal settlement, and we've moved to re-guide that property from rural residential to a business park development. And with the help of Chris and the folks at the Washington County CDA, we've been able to do some pre-development work, such as wetland delineations and a small area plan. And so that's helped us to move that along. That project is in the very beginning stages. It's just under contract within the last couple of months, but we're excited about working on that opportunity. Again, with the help from Washington County CDA, and also we have a number of partnerships with the city of Oakdale since it borders their community as well. We're doing joint road projects with them. We will get sewer from them in order to serve this area, because again, it's up in that northern part of the city that we initially didn't intend there to be sewer. So we appreciate all those folks that are helping us out on that. Recently, our Economic Development Authority has been kind of revitalized. They're working on putting together a strategic plan, and one of their top priorities is meeting with our existing businesses and hearing from those who want to move to Lake Elmo, so we know how we can help you in that transition. In addition, now that the CDA has $600,000 of a grant from the US EPA, we have a 6-acre parcel in downtown Lake Elmo that we hope will be able to help redevelop that area and really connect our business community with some of our new residential areas. So if you haven't been to Lake Elmo recently, please stop by, grab an Aussie pie from Bub's, load up the mountain bike and head to Sunfish Lake Park, then stop at Gorman's for ice cream. Or if that's not your thing, stop by Ox and Crow for an iced mocha to sip while you browse the selection at the Lake Elmo Library. Perhaps golf is more your thing. Schedule a tea time at Royal Golf and enjoy brunch at the Lake Elmo Inn. But before you head out of town, be sure to pick up some delicious steaks or brats from the grill from Hagberg's. And so with that, I'll answer any questions. But again, I just want to share with folks that, we're a whole new Lake Elmo now, and we invite you to come and take a look and see how we can help grow together.
Any questions for Kristina from Lake Elmo or online?
I have questions. So Lake Elmo, I'm from north of that area. What are the good development opportunities in that community? Or is it, are there room for apartments? Is it industrial, manufacturing, warehouse, office buildings? What are the uses that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think we're really blessed in that we have, again, all of those options. And we have them not only along the I-94 corridor, like I said, with this industrial park development that'll be kicking off here soon, that will open up the land adjacent to it to have infrastructure available for both residential, high density, medium density, and low density, as well as some commercial opportunities there and further business park opportunities. And then again, up in the middle of our community in the old village area, we have some redevelopment opportunities or new commercial opportunities, as well as a mixture of housing opportunities from, again, all the way from your single family homes up to apartment buildings. And the newest opening, again, is along Ideal Avenue on our western border. The southern 77 acres of that is guided for business park development. We're still examining and entertaining ideas for the northern 100 and some acres and what we'll do there.
That's a big site. Have you done a demand study, market demand study for housing and multifamily and workforce and that type of?
We have not. That's something that's going to be in our strategic plan that the Economic Development Authority is working on.
Chris Ann can do it for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristina. And I have to give Kristina a lot of credit. She is amazing to work with. She's got a council and an EDA right now that's going through a economic development work plan process to basically start to engage the development community, to start to be proactive, to start looking for partnership opportunities. And a lot of that is due to Kristina's leadership. And we want to thank you for that partnership. And thank you for working with the CDA. Both Eric and Kristina have been very active in applying for the CDA's pre-development finance fund. This is a grant that the CDA essentially began a couple of years ago. After the county board recognized the importance of economic development in Washington County, they allowed the CDA to start to use our levy dollars to offer some grants to the communities. And what we've done with those grant dollars is we've been able to help the communities with some studies. And we've done in Lake Elmo wetland delineation study. We've also looked at some utilities and some layouts and some concepts for the city-owned property. And in Oak Park Heights, we've actually done a couple of projects, one with the King plant, which Eric mentioned, to do kind of an early stage process to form the task force and start to look at opportunities there, but also worked in the area along 36 and Orell Avenue, where right now there's a brand new Panera that just opened about a year or two ago. And we had the opportunity to work with Eric and his team on a redevelopment project. And we offer that grant to our cities to help make those sites a little bit less risky for the developers, so that when you're coming in, we know what the cost of utilities would be. We know where the wetlands might be. Now, Kristina mentioned that the CDA just received a grant from the federal EPA that can cover 100% of the cost for investigation for contamination, possible contamination. We can do phase 1, phase 2s. We can do lead and asbestos testing on buildings. And so those are continuing opportunities that the CDA will work with our communities and the development community to help make things happen. And we're pretty proactive in the county to see economic development projects and to see new economic development and job creation opportunities within the county. So thank you for your partnerships. All right, let's have a little bit of fun now. I've got a gift card for Caribou, and I'm going to ask a trivia question. Jay, go ahead. I'm sorry? Let's hold off on that. Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that, Jay. Bob Streeter from the city of Oakdale was supposed to join us today as well, but he had a conflict and could not make it. So apologize for that, but we'll certainly come back and talk about opportunities in Oakdale at a later date. All right, so a trivia question for you, and you have to have 2 answers to get it right, but there's a Caribou card, a gift card for the person that gets it right. There are 2 state parks in Washington County. Can you name them both for a gift card for Caribou? Anyone?
2 state parks?
2 state parks in Washington County. One in the north, one in the south. Anybody online? They're Googling it right now, I can tell. In Washington County, there are 2 state parks. What are the 2 state parks?
Say it.
Get back here, go ahead. You got it.
You got 2 winners. Because the online, Dave got it right at the same time. I think Dave, the online was in first, but we'll make it right for you, Dave.
Yeah, so the answer was right. So you feel free to come up and get your gift card. But William O'Brien State Park and Marina on St. Croix and Afton State Park in the southern end of the county. So, and I mentioned earlier how proud we are of our natural characteristics. And I forgot to mention one of the other beautiful parts of our county is on the southern end. We're actually bordered by two rivers, the Mississippi River and the St. Croix River. So we're pretty proud of that. All right, we've got a little bit of time and I'd like to ask a few questions to the panelists if you guys don't mind. Okay, one of the questions that we talked a little bit about is some of your recent planning events. Eric mentioned the King plant, and Kristina, I talked a little bit about the EDA. Can you just maybe talk a little bit more about how important those planning efforts are, and how do you engage your council, the community, the EDA in those efforts, and how have they reacted to those planning efforts to date? And either one of you can start. Just kind of get a little bit of inside baseball here. What's happening on the city side of those early stages?
Sure. I think the interaction between the EDA and the city council. So we have the mayor and a council member who serve on our EDA, which is very helpful. Our new mayor who took office in January wants to make economic development one of his top priorities. When we've held our strategic planning session with our city council earlier this year, this was one of the items that was in the top 5 of their priorities. And so we are looking to change from where we'd been in the past, where it was just let the market do what it will and try and be a little more proactive and work with folks. And again, our EDA hadn't met for a couple of years, but they've met 3 or 4 times already this year. And so it's again, a very marked change, I think, of the direction that we'd like to go.
Thank you. Eric, anything to add?
Our Oak Park Heights is, I don't know if this is on.
It is.
Oak Park Heights is largely, certainly there's some available sites, commercial. If you add up all the sites in our city, probably 40 or 50 acres. Maybe the largest is 10, pick a number, but there's a number of infill sites and what have you. But our council and our thought on that largely is trying to work with developers or work with projects that actually add value to our city in terms of livable living wage jobs, adds or fills vacancies or participates well in a redevelopment of a site. That's been our council's goal, those things. And to date, over the last decade, they've probably approved perhaps 1 million square feet of residential commercial square feet in our city alone. So they're adept and astute with what's going on in our town. They know the market, but they also know their role. They try to take a not too aggressive approach with it, but when something presents itself with an opportunity to participate. And on the King plant site, that's a whole new fish for all of us, I think, of 170 acres on the Wild-Nissinnick River. In theory, I could see this being a national or huge project that could be viewed in the long term as how do we transition away from a coal-based economy to a more sustainable use, and what have we done with these old sites? And we want to be viewed as, and our council wants our city to be viewed as a leader in those steps. So those are the 2 big things we've tried to deal with.
Great, thank you. A question for you about data and metrics. And we know how important this data is. We've talked a little bit about workforce, but Eric, you've recently in Oak Park Heights conducted a retail study of some of your space that's available. Can you talk a little bit about how that data and metrics can be used to help educate and identify opportunities, and what did the data show?
Well, so we've done a couple of different studies for different reasons, and each one have their motivation. So obviously you get some of the data you want when you design the study. But what we found is obviously our vacancy rate remains low. And that's obviously what our council wants. Politically, it's not good to have vacancies in your city. Nobody wants to look at empty buildings. So our council will, how much vacant space do we really have? And it's significantly low, but we do have these old centers that are changing. the statistics of it. I think we have 18 different multi-tenant retail centers. I think the vacancy rate was like 16%. But that includes the total gross square feet. They're all well managed, and there's no real derelict facilities in our community. I think the hardest thing, part of our comments we've received from some of the ownership has been finding staff for these tenants to fill those necessary hours. That's becoming increasingly difficult.
Mhm.
And we even saw White Castle close because of that. So at least that's what we were told. So anyway, so those are the dynamics.
Thank you, Eric. And Christine, I know that at the Lake Elmo EDA, we've also talked about doing some labor shed analysis studies for that exact reason. We know that the number one thing that a site selector or a commercial realtor or a business is going to ask us is, can you tell us about your workforce? And so we've talked a little bit about the Lake Elmo EDA doing labor analysis. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we might be looking for and looking for feedback from you to connect with us to tell us what would be important? What are the information points that you would like to see if we do a study, maybe throughout the county? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess again, we're just starting. That'd be something that we hope to do early next year to get that kicked off, and would appreciate any feedback as far as what's helpful for folks. We're all kind of learning here as we go in Lake Elmo. So.
And certainly things are changing, post-pandemic. What's it going to look like? Are those folks that are working remotely now going to stay in Washington County and not drive downtown anymore? We just don't know, but we'd love to know if we do a labor shed study, what would be helpful? What kind of information would you like to see as a development community? And please connect with any of us throughout the day today to let us know what your thoughts are on that.
One thing,
Please, go
Chris, I think our city council is also. So we have a code book, right? Every city's got its code book, that's this thick. It's 400 pages of do's and don'ts that we all have. And a lot of things are beneficial. We all live in these cities because a lot of that code restricts and allows different things. And we all probably enjoy the fruits of what our cities look like. However, our city council is fully aware that those codes, in light of the pandemic, are going to need to adapt and shift, but we don't know what they should say.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come to us, when developers come to the city, give us some ideas that say, here's what works for us. And otherwise we have these boxes we get to drop you in. What can we do to massage these boxes to change parking minimums, get rid of parking, height restrictions, designs? Again, we want it to all look good and we want to be good neighbors, but what simple things can we do? So tell us when you show up this works, this doesn't. Mixed use, or a B2 zoning in our city is commercial. Well, our council would probably say, yeah, we might consider residential as part of that. Blah, blah, blah.
No, I think that's a very important point, Eric, and thanks for mentioning it. I know that's important for many of the cities that we're going to hear from today, is that we want to reach out to you and find out what is important to you and how can we work together to make these things happen. So, and you find that Lake Elmo and Oak Park Heights are doing that exact same thing today. We're just reaching out and saying, we want to work with you. We want to partner with you. How do we do it better? To that question, on complicated developments, and I'll throw this out to both of you, whoever wants to answer it. On complicated developments with complex investment structures, timing is everything. What's a fair estimate for how long a permitting process takes in your community from the time you learn about the project to when the shovels can actually hit the ground? And Eric, we're working on a project right now with an existing manufacturing company that's looking to expand. How long will it take that company from the time you learned about it to actually turning the dirt? And Christine, if you've got other examples, I'd love to hear that as well.
Well, of course it could depend, but I would argue in our city, 60 days. If people have a reasonable plan, reasonably put together, we meet with it at staff level. We want to kick it up to the planning commission as soon as possible. Are the utilities there? Is it a stormwater issue? Sometimes the developers that come in have a well-baked plan. Sometimes they don't. So if it's a reasonably baked plan, 60 days.
Mm-hmm. Christina?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we've had commercial developments that come in and they've completed all the requirements and we're able to run preliminary plat and final plat at the same time, and it takes maybe 2 to 3 months. I'll be honest, on the other hand, if we've got some complex residential developments or all the infrastructure plans aren't in place, we've seen it take up to 10 months in that time. And so we really want to work with folks to have those early conversations to make sure that you know what the expectations are, so you don't have to go through a lot of reiterations with our engineering departments. And that's where we see things move the quickest is when the developers have done that upfront work to prepare. And certainly if if anybody runs into roadblocks with our staff anywhere, let us know. And I think we've been creative in ways of trying to find avenues that maybe aren't the traditional ways to help move things forward. So, again, we're open to those suggestions, but, it is important to us that, I've bragged about our community earlier. It's important we keep that great community too. And so we really have to balance that. And we want we know you're coming to Lake Elmo because it's great. And we want to make sure it stays great for all the years that you're there. And so those are the balancing acts that we go through, but we're flexible where we can be.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's take a quick pause to see if there are any questions either from the people here on the floor today or online. Please feel free to ask.
Are there any minimums as far as multifamily goes in Lake Elmo or Park Heights? As far as putting an apartment building, you have to have 3 stories, or does Lake Elmo not even want that?
Could you repeat the question?
I wouldn't like their,
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest issues.
Sure.
It took forever to get one project in there.
Mhm.
I would like to see a couple more.
Mhm.
The restrictions are.
Yeah. So the question was if there's any minimum requirements for high density housing like apartments. I think, the biggest minimum, if you will, is to make sure you fall within that density range, which for Lake Elmo, if it's in the Old Village area, it's 8 to 12 units. And if it's south in the I-94 corridor, it's 10 to 15. And so we usually don't find problems with people meeting those minimums. We have more challenges of people wanting to go beyond that. And we do have a PUD process that allows a 20% density bonus with some extra amenities and whatnot. So that's not really been a problem in Lake Elmo to meet the minimums. It's really more about the other side.
One, not so much in Oak Park Heights, we're a more mature community. We don't have the open spaces where we have to deal with some of those. But I would tell you is, as you drive through the 36 corridor and you look at the Walmarts, the Lowe's, the Menards that are in our city, there's vast empty space in parking lots, just vast. Acres and acres and acres and acres and acres and acres of impervious space that's doing nothing but sitting there empty. Wouldn't it be great to mine some of that out and put in some residential developments? Yeah, of course, there's easements and deed restrictions and sight lines and 36. I get all that, but you can't tell me there isn't ways to massage that. So if somebody come to us some ideas and try to mine that out to create some residential space, the utilities are basically there. It's already impervious. You've already dealt with your stormwater. So let's hear some ideas, but that's all I could.
You could actually have half of that building with river views.
Well, yeah, it'd be really high. Yeah, but in theory, even if it's something, maybe, but that's still a long way away.
Eric, you brought up a good point, and one that I had on my list, but I didn't talk about is Highway 36. And Kristina as well, you have boundaries that border Highway 36 as well. What has the impact of that St. Croix River crossing been on your communities? Can you talk a little bit about that?
A lot of traffic. Our biggest impacts are, the Manning 36 interchange that's being built because of safety concerns. There's safety concerns at Lake Elmo Avenue and 36. So we are in the process of looking at improvements there. We have some small businesses along 36. Again, our challenge is that our Met Council sewer comes from I-94 and has to work its way up. So there's very limited business opportunities there. We are seeing some housing developments that are on private septics up there. But again, most of our growth has been along the I-94 corridor in the Old Village.
Okay. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about the impact of Highway 36?
So 50,000 cars a day on 36. is I think the current number versus maybe 20 years ago in the 25,000 cars per day range.
So it's doubled.
So it's doubled, and it's predicted to increase. And Kristina mentioned the improvements at Manning in 36, and then there's Lake Elmo in 36. And as you move into Oak Park Heights, Stillwater, that's going to be of course, that's the scuttlebutt around town as well. They got to get rid of those 3 intersections. Well, how do you do that? Those are integral to a community being able to move back and forth. Maybe you get rid of one, but I think that's the next generation of people who are going to really have to crack that nut, not to mention pay for it.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions online or from the audience here today? Don't be bashful. We've got time. All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up. Is there anything that either one of you want to add that would be really important for the audience today to know about your communities, or how can they best reach out to you, and how might that look if they try to connect directly with you?
Yeah, the biggest message I want to leave folks with today is, again, we're a new Lake Elmo, so erase everything you know about us. We want to work with you. We want to see that growth in the appropriate areas. Please reach out to me here today, or I'm sure you can find my information online as well.
Thank you. Eric?
The 2 things, King Plants, 170 acres. What would be your company's vision? If you own that land, what would you do with it? So maybe you start talking about that amongst yourselves. And if you have any great ideas, give me a call. And then we have a lot of vacant, empty space in parking lots that just sits there empty.
For redevelopment opportunities.
For redevelopment or just development. And so, yeah, so those 2 things. You got any ideas? Call me.
Great. Thank you both. I appreciate it. Let's give them a round of applause. We got a short break, and then we've got a really good panel coming up from the city of Woodbury next. So please stay tuned.
We're taking a break live. so-
All right, thank you. We're going to take a break, so we'll reconvene in here in 10, 15 minutes. Thanks. All right, if everybody can find their seats, both here and at home, we're going to get started with our second panel. And as I'm introducing, the panel can please make their way up here. Next panel is Woodbury's Northeast Development Area Project. Moderating this panel is going to be Karl Batalden from the city of Woodbury. Did I get it right?
Close enough, you know.
How do you say it?
Batalden. It's an obscure.
Karl
regional
Batalden
facility.
from the city of Woodbury moderating this. Thanks. Here's your clicker.
Thank you. Right is forward. All right. So are we? Okay. All right. Great. Well, we're going to have some PowerPoint slides in the background for us. And thank you everyone for being here this morning. And to those of you that are watching online, I hope your connection stays good. And we're here today to talk a little bit about Woodbury's Northeast area. Just to do some quick introductions first. If I can figure out how to use, there we go. So my name is Karl Batalden, work for the city of Woodbury. I'm going to moderate the panel. I work in our housing and economic development areas. Woodbury, for those of you not familiar, we're about 36 square miles just east of downtown St. Paul at the intersection of 494, 94, and 694, roughly 75,000 residents, 1,700 businesses, and we hope that you're going to have that next one, make it 1,701. So just kind of going down the panel here, Lisa Dargis from Minnesota Deed, Eric Searles from the city of Woodbury, and Dan Mueller from Ryan. And maybe Lisa, I'll turn it over to you to let you do the introductions as we go down the panel.
Okay. I'm Lisa Dargis. I've worked for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development for about 10 years. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I work in the Office of Business Finance. DEED is the state's principal economic development agency. Is it not on? Now, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
No.
You just gotta get real close.
Okay. All right, we'll put it right there. Is that better? Okay. No singing. So I've worked for DEED for about 10 years. We promote business recruitment, expansion, and retention, international trade, workforce, and community development. In the Office of Business Finance, I am the manager of the State Small Business Credit Initiative Unit, which is newly created. I've been in that role for about a week. Prior to that, I worked as the lead for the Minnesota Investment Fund program. Our office has a variety of programs. I think with all of the pandemic funding and things, we're probably up over 25 or close to 30. But we kind of try and structure things so that we've got programs that can assist businesses throughout the funding continuum and then at different points in their life cycles.
And my name is Eric Searles. I'm the city planner for the city of Woodbury. I've been with Woodbury for 20 years. My role in the organization is to manage the short-term and long-term planning activities, the day-to-day planning activities, and then comprehensive planning. I manage the economic development staff as well as the housing staff and code enforcement. Generally speaking, my broad role is to shepherd the development review process from the initial application process with prospective developers, landowners, and the like, and moving it through to the entitlement process all the way through to city council. And really what we see is our role is moving people from A to B and trying to help through that process, help with understanding the individual context of the situation that you're developing in and some of the things that are unique to Woodbury. Every community has got a little bit of a different climate, a little bit of different things that are really important to that community. Our job as staff is to help those that are looking to invest, to understand what those uniquenesses are in Woodbury and help put together strategies to move from A to B.
Problem solve, shepherd, strategize, the whole 9 yards. Good morning, I'm Dan Mueller, Vice President of Development with Ryan Companies. I focus on industrial and business park development. I've been at Ryan for just over 8 years now, and my role is to identify sites, work on customer, broker, end user relationships, coordinate with cities, and structure deals on the front end, and then shepherd through the development process. Ryan is also a general contractor, as most of you folks may know, so full in-house development, design, and construction services.
All right, well, with that, we'll kind of dig into the meat of the matter here. So just on the slide, you can see us, here's a map of the Twin Cities showing where there are some of the large, well-known brands from corporate users. And then Woodbury is in the East Metro. And the point of today's panel is to introduce our Northeast area, which is that red rectangle up in the corner of the Woodbury map on the screen abutting I-94. So let's see here. The clicker's not wanting to advance the slide here. Let's see, Jay, can you maybe just go one forward here? There we go. So Eric, maybe I'll let you give us some of that 30,000 foot background on the Northeast area and give us some information about what we're looking at here.
Yeah, the map on the screen identifies our Northeast area. It's about 400 acres of generally non-developed land. We've had a few development applications, including Condeva here that we're going to talk greater on, but generally speaking, it's undeveloped land. The roadways that you can see there are Settlers Ridge Parkway on the left-hand side of the screen. On the top of the screen is Interstate 94. The middle road is Hudson Road, and then the far right side is Manning Avenue. So it is directly adjacent with full interchange access to the freeway system. And obviously in this location, you also have great access to Interstate 494 and 694. So we really see this Northeast area as a piece of property or multiple properties that are really strategically located to achieve some of the goals of light industrial, manufacturing, distribution, different types of uses than what has been seen in Woodbury in the past. And just to give a little bit of overview on Woodbury's development history, we've had pretty significant retail activity in the community. We are the retail hub of Washington County. There's several million square feet spread out through multiple centers: Woodbury Village, Tamarack Village, Woodbury Lakes, and then the area around Woodbury Drive, County Road 19, are really those kind of power areas that create our commercial market. That development occurred from really the 1980s through 2015. And then we went into more of a pretty significant medical, and we had a lot of growth in medical. City Place is a good example of that, but really spread through the community. And over 500,000 square feet of medical office was built, which was great for the community, brought high quality jobs, brought convenient healthcare, really high quality healthcare to not only the residents of Woodbury, but the residents of all of Washington County. So really we view that as being the hub of healthcare for the East Metro and really the metro area as a whole. And what this led to is conversations as part of our 2040 comprehensive plan. What's next? What are the areas that we can continue to diversify not only our tax base, our commercial holdings, but also our job creation? What types of uses are we going to target based on the quality of the sites that we have remaining as the city continues to grow? And as I started with, this location within the Northeast area really lends itself to marketing towards the light industrial, the manufacturing, the distribution type uses. And that's really a high background overview of the Northeast area. And in order for us to tackle that, there's been significant planning work. The previous group panel talked about planning activities in advance. To get a 400-acre development teed up for review, you have to do environmental review. And in this case, the city selected to do an AUAR. And I'll be honest, that's been a bit of a rocky process. AUARs are cumbersome documents, and they, by state law, have to be updated every 5 years. And when you start to go through a process of trying to identify 400 acres, and this graphic shows some of this exercise, 400 acres, 4 million or so square feet of development, How long does that take? What type of uses? What are the distribution from a vehicle? What are the water, sewer needs of those areas? At the end, as you start to dig in, you start to feel often like you're in a crystal ball exercise. And that's really a challenging part of an AUAR. And really, as I guess from the panel standpoint, and for those that may find themselves at some point in a similar exercise, the advice that Woodbury staff would give is try to look at it from different levels and really try to look at it from a standpoint of, can you look at an aspirational side, maybe the maximum amount of development yield that could occur, but also make sure that you have some analysis of more of a conservative amount of development yield. Because what you're going to run into later, if you only focus on the high level yield, and that's really what the EAW and AUAR process kind of leads you towards, you can end up with data that really puts some pretty significant challenges in front of you when you go to implement. And that was one of the things that took us, frankly, quite a few years to get through on the Northeast area, was the infrastructure needs of this area as we move from a planning phase to an implementation phase. The roadway network that you see on the screen is, and Dan can jump in here shortly, is really that movement from the AUAR, which identified a 4-lane segment from Hudson Road all the way, or from where it terminates just kind of east of Woodbury Drive, all the way to Manning. The AUAR identified, because of the study that we conducted and millions of square feet of commercial space, a whole new roadway network, a whole new Hudson Road being constructed. We had tens of millions of dollars of roadway that were necessary to be built. And as you can guess, that stunted growth of these commercial uses. Fast forward several years, we started to look at it a little differently, and we started to, with help from Ryan as a partner, when this opportunity came in front of us, to start looking at it to try to back in. What are the opportunities from a phased approach? And maybe I'll turn it over to Dan on some of the thoughts on a phased approach versus trying to study a 20-year development area and get it right from an infrastructure early.
Well, I think that is the key, the phasing of the infrastructure, and backing up a little bit on kind of the lessons learned on the AUAR process, taking it from a city planning perspective and trying to relay that to the market. The market is all about certainty and providing deadlines, and here's what we can deliver and when, and here's how much it's going to cost. The AUAR is a great box to check in terms of we're ready to go, but there's still a lot of deciphering and interpretation that has to be done thereafter. So maintaining flexibility of development, but still offering certainty, is a really hard balance. So it was great that the groundwork was done with the AUAR, but being able to apply it to a specific user, and in particular, the first user, as I'm sure a lot of you have came across in your experience, the first one's always the toughest to understand. All right, here's what the costs are. Here's what we're going to ask the rest of the development to take on in the future. Are we going to bite off more than we can chew with this particular user? Are we going to spend money that these improvements won't be utilized in the future? So a lot of those really hard questions and really tough planning that the city was great to kind of guide us on in terms of what will the council be on board with? What's a prudent decision from long-term planning standpoint on interim stages? You know, I think we had some really wise decisions on some interim grading, where therefore we could just build on with paving for future road improvements. A lot of detailed decisions like that, where if we took it from a holistic standpoint, saying, hey, we got to improve Hudson Road when the first user Kindeva comes, the project never would have happened. So I think it's that balance of making sure you're taking on not only what you have to, but you're setting yourself up for success in the future. And a lot of that takes time. I think that was another lesson learned, is that despite, you know, being shovel ready, I mean, the site is about as simple as it gets. There's very little grading. Those types of iterations, especially on the first user, take time. I think for the remaining development, which we'll get into in a bit, we've got approximately 50 acres still next door. Those questions are answered, and we've got a pad prepped. We've got the development agreement infrastructure set already, and we can make a lot of those decisions a heck of a lot faster than we could in the past. So that was sort of the guts and sort of the structure of how we set everything up. Maybe jumping more into the Kindeva specifics. I don't know if we want to get right in there.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of, Ryan was playing this key role as a developer partner for the city. And then what we saw was that site selection process, both to land the Condeva headquarters, their worldwide headquarters. And then I want to ask Lisa to talk a little bit about how the state comes in and helps play a role with that site selection. And particularly in this case, I call it the alphabet soup because there's so many different acronym programs that the state offers. And I think a lot of folks are familiar with some of their flagship programs, Minnesota Investment Fund, Job Creation Fund, but also this new program that helped pay for public infrastructure that really was able to help figure out some of those last funding sources and the importance of paying your fair share. But Lisa, let me ask you some questions and let you just kind of share Deed's approach to how you work with site selectors and what happens when these opportunities come to you.
Sure. Overall, our philosophy with site selectors is to basically try and get in front of them as often as possible. You want to be a location that they think of that immediately comes to mind when they're looking for properties for a business to either expand or relocate. And the best way to do that is to be able to develop relationships and be able to tell Minnesota's story, that we have a great, highly skilled workforce, things that are going to be memorable for them, so that when they are kind of doing this initial search, you come to mind and they reach out to you. Obviously, a lot of the questions that they're going to start asking are about available inventory, but then also about funding and incentive programs. So as Karl mentioned, we have our flagship programs, the Minnesota Investment Fund, which serves more as a source of funds for a project. The Condeva project, I believe, received about $515,000 through the Minnesota Investment Fund program. And we can award up to $1 million. We channel the funds through a local unit of government. It can be either at the county or the city level. We award them a grant and then they in turn make a loan to the business. In this case for Condeva, I believe it was a forgivable loan. So it can be very, very inexpensive money. The Minnesota Job Creation Fund, by contrast, is a pay-for-performance program. So it's not source of funds money. It basically isn't realized by the business until they meet certain benchmarks and thresholds for the project. So we award a certain amount of funding for job creation and then other funds for real property improvement. So I think with Condeva, it was $330,000 towards job creation and then $20,000 towards the real property improvements. And then another program that we use frequently that doesn't get a lot of discussion is the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership. I don't know that Condeva utilized that, but it's one that we oftentimes will have in our term sheets because it's a group of programs that offers money for training for employees. And sometimes that's another good incentive for companies if they've got to retrain or train new workers, they can get funds to partner with educational institutions, businesses, and nonprofits to try and get that done. We have a team of business development managers that are regional throughout the state. And they're really the folks who undertake that building relationships with the site selectors. And then when we are approached about a particular location, they're the ones who are looking to partner with cities and find out what inventory is available, whether or not they know how shovel ready their sites are, what the cost of land is going to be, zoning restrictions, infrastructure that's going to be needed. They bring meet with the company and the site selector and try and get that information up front that we're going to need for all of those programs, things like job creation numbers, wages that are going to be paid, the amount of capital investment there will be for land acquisition, construction, equipment. They bring all of that information back to us and we, as quickly as possible, try and turn around and get estimates back to them so that they can put together what we call a non-binding estimate of state assistance, or a term sheet, I think is probably the non-governmental term for that.
And maybe if I can just jump in, that term sheet, the the way that you're surprisingly quick, I think.
Mhm.
And I mean that as a compliment. I mean, you'll notice up on the screen, we have a screenshot of the letter from the term sheet from May of 2020. And, this is during the lockdown period of the pandemic when, everything was remote and virtual and the world was adjusting to a new reality. And Deed was very responsive. And I think that's one of the things that's really worth highlighting is that, we're working on this parallel track with you've got, Eric working with Dan on the development stuff, on the infrastructure and the sites and the zoning and the land use, all that stuff. And then we're able to have a parallel track going on the financing. And I think that really helped us to be able to have that term sheet from the state so that we knew what's real. It's not just this hypothetical, and you're able to have those parallel processes working together, getting you from the beginning of this process with the term sheet in May to financing closing in fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I'll build a little on that as well. And Dan, I think we haven't talked about this, but I think you feel probably the same way. There are variables in a development process, and funding is always one of those variables. Through this process, did not feel like the state's participation was a variable, and that's right. The highest level of compliment that I can give from my perspective and what my role in this transaction was. It was pretty clearly communicated the opportunity, what the process was, the timelines, and the state performed at every checkpoint. And so that's really beneficial as you try to put the puzzle of funding together to make a development deal work. And like all development deals that come in front of us, there's a timeline, and that timeline's always urgent. And so that process of having that variable be not a variable, but more of a known, was really beneficial to getting us over the finish line. And from the city of Woodbury standpoint, we had not gone through a number of these programs. And the interesting part looking back, because of the consistency of communication, because of the willingness to communicate from the state, even during the pandemic, looking back on it, we never felt like it was a question. And that, again, is just credibility to the system that the state's built.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we understand we're competing. If a site selector is reaching out to us, they're reaching out to other states too. So, the best thing that we can do is give them some concrete numbers, make the information clear so they understand what's required of the programs. And the majority of our programs are fairly straightforward. I've heard that there are some programs in other states that are very difficult to understand. We try and make it as clear as possible. This is, how much money might be available, and this is what it's for. And then get that information turned around quickly so that we can try and compete and hopefully beat everybody else out. That's kind of the goal.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit? I know, Kendeva's not here and Jones Lang LaSalle couldn't be here today, but just kind of a little bit of, how did you find Kendeva, and then the construction, not only of this building, but then, what you see coming down the pike on the area immediately to the east of Kendeva?
Sure. Maybe before that, just commenting on what Eric mentioned about confidence in the state, from a market perspective, anytime there's a third-party funding source, flags go up, right? But we're not only relying on the company to maintain their decision path, new development, all the uncertainty there, but also another source of funding. So there was a lot of hesitancy going in, but I think once we got in, and really with the help of JLL as well, certainty was built, confidence was built throughout the project, and obviously you guys delivered. So it was great working with you guys, but that opinion changed, I think, throughout the process, where there was a little bit of uneasiness going in. So kudos to you and your team for pulling it together. And then maybe transitioning just to the project itself. Kendeva is the building that's under construction right now that was shown on the screen previously. They are a really interesting story. They're a former business unit of 3M. They're actually the group that invented the cartridge inhaler. So the medicinal release piece that you pop into your inhalers. They've had that patented for a number of years, and they're a drug delivery manufacturer. So they've got 3 lines of products. It's inhalants such as the inhalers that I mentioned, micro needles, which is a smaller than your typical needle that doesn't penetrate all the way to the nerve ending. It's supposed to be a painless drug delivery process. And then patches as well. So like a a morphine or a nicotine patch surface level drug delivery system. So they were sold to a third-party entity from 3M in the spring of last year, and all of a sudden they had to find their way out of the 3M campus. And logically, the next place to go was to the east, and we were able to work with JLL to put our site in front of them, and their use, it's about 140,000 square foot building. Approximately 65 of that is office space on 2 levels of mezzanine. And then almost the entire remainder is clean room and lab space. So anything existing was really off the table because they had a major investment into their space above and beyond just what we as landlord provided for them. But it was a long-term deal. You know, they've got a really interesting business model, and keep in mind, you know, this is smack dab in the middle of COVID. So they were deemed an essential business, you know, focused on respiratory health. So their story of growth was really compelling. So that made it easy on the story side of the tenant, but putting the deal together outside of that with financing and all your other partners was really hard because A, you couldn't get together with anybody in person, of course, to build that trust, but B, just money wasn't as readily available. The big banks were, Wells and US Bank, were kind of off to the sidelines. We had to look for other sources, and certainty of kind of our equity investors for buyers was not nearly as robust as it was previously. So that was sort of the story of Kindeva during COVID. And of course, as we've all discussed, we were able to pull it together and break ground in October of last year. And we are set to turn over in September of this year, along with a host of other improvements to the area, fully signalized intersection. Utilities are now brought out to the remainder of the site. And then the roadway improvements are under construction as well now. So it was a challenging process, but we got there.
Yeah, and I think just building on that pandemic timeline, I mean, we started this process really as the pandemic, working from home was getting set in. And so everyone was learning on how do you do plan reviews? How do you look at floor plans? How do you look at all the different things that come together as part of a development from your new environment? And then the missing part of the collaboration that is so key to development work. And that really was something that was challenging. But what the good news coming out of that was, I think what we learned is, and it was a very basic concept that we created, which was simply a weekly PMT meeting. Yeah. And we met weekly through this process as a check-in point. And again, that's a very basic concept, but we hadn't really done that before on major projects. And it's something that we now, from a development standpoint, on major projects, we just set that up kind of day one, weekly, reoccurring, half an hour, 1 hour. It allows everyone from the private side, from the public side. It holds people accountable because you know you're going to have to answer the next week, and people's calendars fill up. So it really was a lesson learned, if you will. And if we wouldn't have done that very minor scheduling thing, I don't know if we would have gotten to the finish line.
But I think it goes to more of the groundwork piece as well. And I don't think we touched on this, but one thing that was really smart when we first got engaged, that you guys did before even Ryan's involvement, was kind of an education of, I think, staff and council, where you did the market tour of what industrial facilities look like. And I think there was another smart decision of diversifying the tax base to try and welcome this product type into the community, and understand that industrial isn't smokestacks and dirty uses. It's clean and welcoming from a planning and aesthetics perspective. And then I also think Kindeva was probably the perfect user to kind of welcome that product type in, because there's so many jobs, and it's really a gorgeous looking facility, probably one of the better looking industrial facilities that you'll see in the market. So I think it was a perfect fit and perfect timing to be the first user in. Although I remember texting you shortly after approval thinking, God, did we set the bar too high from design? And Eric immediately snapped back saying, can't you just be happy we got the deal done?
Okay, maybe Eric, can you talk a little bit about that perception issue though, in terms of things? Sometimes people look at Woodbury, they see a lot of brick, they see a lot of stone, they think, certain things about quality. Can you talk a little bit about that staff and elected decision regarding, yes, the embrace of light industrial, we want these projects?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we really use as a mantra is perception is reality. And so one of the things we really strive to do is understand what the perceptions are, And then we have a decision to make. Do you build off of those perceptions, or do you try to correct them? And do you try to put strategies together to correct those perceptions, because they may be a barrier for you to ultimately get to where you want to be? And I think that latter part was what we were dealing with in the Northeast area, which was this perception that because of the success that Woodbury had within developing the commercial markets, retail and office, using our 65% class one materials, brick and stone, that the market felt, well, that Woodbury really isn't, these types of buildings really aren't within Woodbury's vision. And so we had to do some very strategic things as part of our comprehensive plan. We did marketing at a number of different industry events. We did a labor study to identify that there is labor for light industrial and manufacturing and e-commerce within this area, to really try to have tangible ways to show the market, no, we are interested. That's one of the things that we're really excited. As Dan said, you can't pick a better user to kick off a 400-acre business park area than Condeva, but just having that building there in its location adjacent to Interstate 94 and such a visual presence, it sends an indication to the rest of the market of what type of uses are going to be supported there, what type of uses are wanted there. And that was really important from a staff standpoint to get this kickstarted off on the right foot. And we really think that this area, and sometimes you'd rather be lucky than good. And I'll admit that up front, that we are probably in that situation right now. As you look at the marketplace as office and retail, Woodbury has had some, as I've said, pretty significant success in those areas. And now we're transitioning. And the market that's pretty hot and is probably going to be around for a while is this light industrial manufacturing. And we are well positioned with hundreds of acres, with labor, and with great access. So we're really excited about the opportunity that this is going to provide for the community and for Washington County as a whole to continue to be an employment center for the county.
Yeah, proof of concept is what I think of when I think of Condeva. And one other step along the way that I think was important was just the simple lunch we did with economic development staff and some members of the council, with I'd say 30 members of the brokerage community, just to kind of show here's what we've got for land. We're serious about this. I think we got a lot of questions before then saying, hey, can you actually do market industrial in Woodbury? We'd say, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we can. But I think taking that little step just to show, in person, spend some time, get to know some of the people, I think was important too.
Yeah, and Dan alluded to some tours. City staff had done a number of tours to areas all across the metro area, looking at the development patterns for light industrial, manufacturing, e-commerce type uses. And we wanted to do that to make sure that we understood what the requirements were to successfully implement those types of projects, and make sure that our ordinances supported those activities. Make sure that there wasn't any barriers in front of us, but also look at some of it from an infrastructure standpoint. And one of the reasons we were able to get comfortable with some of the modifications as it related to the traffic improvements, again, moving from a 4-lane segment to a divided 2-lane, some of these very major cost savings initiatives came from those tours. As we looked at implemented areas of millions of square feet of these types of uses, the roadway networks are generally pretty modest. And the reason for that is how the uses distribute traffic. And we were able to get pretty comfortable with that. And that comfort allows us, from a staff standpoint, to articulate that to the Planning Commission and Council ultimately, as they start to look at, well, why did we take that step? We also obviously have significant amount of traffic studies that support those decisions as well. So it's not just a perception or a review of areas, but you have to go to those sites to understand what they look like and what they feel like.
Slightly more impactful to go look at one versus read a 90-page traffic study.
Yeah. Good read though.
And Jay, could you go one slide further? The clicker's not working again, but maybe kind of transition from that point. We've been talking a little bit about what are we seeing, in the Northeast area, and maybe what's next, but also, Lisa, I want to ask you from a state perspective, as you're seeing these types of uses and applications coming in, Are the state funding streams aligned for these types of light industrial and manufacturing uses? You know, I think these panels are great opportunities to tell the story about Woodbury, but I'm sure some of you out in the audience are trying to figure out, how does this work in my community? Or I have a client that's looking to build something like this. Does it make sense for this location or another one? And maybe you could just kind of share a little bit from a state perspective, how these uses line up with the funding that you offer.
Well, generally they line up really well. I mean, as we discussed earlier, if this is too far down, no, we're not. You know, the Minnesota Investment Fund and the Job Creation Fund are fabulous tools for that, the training programs. And then the other program that was utilized for this project, I'll see if I can get it right because it's really long, the Innovative Business Development Public Infrastructure Program. This is why we have acronyms, IBDPI. You know, that one provides funding for economic development projects, even though it's, you know, tagged as a public infrastructure program. It's for businesses that are undertaking innovative business processes and using proprietary technology. So, you know, for this particular project, the funds were used for that intersection, for turn lanes and improvements. And I think it was awarded around $475,000. There needs to be matching funds, but that can kind of take a bite out of some of the infrastructure costs. There's some other programs that we've got for transportation, economic development, infrastructure too. So, you know, it's worth exploring what we have at the state, not just from a, you know, the business development kind of programs that you're really familiar with, to when you're setting up an area like this that's going to be, you know, broader and have a range of users, if there are other programs that we can help with for infrastructure too.
Thank you.
Is there a timeline of how long that program is available, by the way, just out of curiosity?
I don't think I know the answer to that.
Okay, sorry.
It did seem like when we were working with the funding applications, it's contingent somewhat on the state budget process.
Okay.
You know, so different programs get funded in different amounts every year. But I remember at one point we picked the amount of money that we were asking for based on, well, that was like how much was left in the kitty for that year. You know, so Jeremy LaCroix at the state has he's just the encyclopedia about this program. And my understanding is it got re-upped for, you know, future years as well.
I don't know the amount though.
Yeah. Okay, well, you know, we've talked a lot about Condeva, our Northeast area. Dan, anything you want to offer about, I mean, you did the Condeva project, you know, but you've got sort of that ghost plat, if you will, of potential 4 buildings right next to it. Any thoughts you want to share about that?
Yeah, we've got about 50 acres right next door that's ready to go. You can see on the screen, the northwest corner, that building is about 170,000 square feet. If you've driven by there, you'll see a big pad. So that facility is ready to go for the next user. That can certainly be flexible. Like we mentioned earlier, flexibility and certainty are tough to pair, but in this case, we've got a pretty good combination of knowns with our infrastructure, with what the city supports, and the flexibility is really provided in the land and what we can do from different sizes and configurations. So I expect once the dust settles from the roadwork construction that's going on right now and people are able to get around and see the facility, I expect activity to pick up significantly in that area.
Yeah, and I think we anticipate seeing the same, and it's not just on the site that's shown on the screen. There's other land areas, and Karl, maybe if you can go back to the overall map of the Northeast area. There are a number of different opportunities that are there. Some are kind of in this business park format that has significant market opportunity there, but then there's also going to be some ability for individual users to come in on, and that's really on what's shown there on the southern portion. That's the Black Diamond site. What does that say? Area 7. Yeah. The Area 7 site. Area 7 site will have different opportunities, and we're looking to really provide some unique environments there for potentially some outside storage, some light industrial uses that, again, from that perception standpoint, users may have said, I don't think that's really going to be what Woodbury is wanting to be. I think what we're trying to do with that site early on the design side is look at it from the standpoint of how do we position this site to hide some of those exterior uses that the businesses need, but that'll still allow it to meet that quality side of that Woodbury development is known for, but get ahead of it and provide that certainty as it goes to market, so that as a brokerage community, as users and others look at this saying, oh, well, there is an opportunity for us to do a little bit of outside storage as part of our creation of our overall business and places to work land use.
What do you think about outside storage next to Kendeva?
I think that one might be, well, we'll see. There's an interior truck dock. I mean, that's some level of exterior. And we've had some really good success with screening and landscaping and softening. And that's the conversation that we're going to look at. How do you look at the context of each individual user and position it to meet the broad community goals? But it's a case by case review, and the solutions come from what does the site allow for, and using buildings. That the site that Dan shows, you've got significant truck docks there. If we can move back to the Kendeva slide, you can see the initial design there. There is ample parking for loading and in that shared truck courtyard. One more back. Oh boy.
Yep. Okay, back up a couple.
All right, ample. We got 2 clickers, I think.
Yeah,
This
I
is
think
fun.
Oh, is mine working now? Okay, all right. So it wasn't earlier.
Just lags a little bit.
Patience, Carl. So you'll see when it does come back up here, there is a shared courtyard area. That is an indication of flexibility. And will there be needs for more flexibility? Potentially. And as those occur, we'll look at opportunities there. Thank you. On that bottom left, you see significant truck parking areas. That's a need for these types of uses. That's a known. So how do you take the known? How do you provide that in a way that's going to meet the requirements? So we're trying to hide it within building design. Dan and his team have done a great job providing some of those. As Dan talked about, this is not what it's going to ultimately look like. As users are known, there's going to be modifications. And as part of those modifications, we'll come up with context solutions that meet the needs of both the city and the user.
I had to put you on the spot. The other thing I'd call out on some of the more global site planning is that there's other activity in this area beyond just industrial. I mean, there's townhomes going in, apartments, senior living. There's this whole area is really starting to take off. And as much as that it doesn't directly result in industrial activity, momentum is just great. It's fantastic.
Dan, do you see the addition of the multifamily, kitty corner from this site is helping with some of that labor shed question from users?
I think so. That's part of it, but also just simple as if you're a CEO looking to select your site and you see vacant land, you're not just looking at cornfields all around you. You've got other activity, and it just seems like more of a vibrant site, especially for users like Kendeva that are more labor focused and job driven versus something like a distribution use. I mean, that any more action that could spur retail or amenities is all just positive.
Well, before we, switch over to questions from the room, are there any online questions for folks that are participating virtually? Otherwise, happy to take any questions from folks that are in the room in Golden Valley here today. I can see in the back, Mike.
Dan, is the Kendeva site owned by Kendeva, or is it leased?
It's a lease.
Can you repeat that for the?
Oh, yeah. The question was, is Kendeva owned by Kendeva or is it a lease? And it's a lease.
Yes, ma'am.
Kyle Jordan, formerly with Dean. Nice to finally meet you, Kyle.
Yeah, many text messages and phone calls during the pandemic, but Kyle and I never met in person. So that's another fun thing about being in Golden Valley on a Thursday morning.
But we're with you now, and I'm curious specifically about how the city of Woodbury really had that appetite to get the site ready before development. I mean, the deed programs are wonderful in winning that, but I think you're selling yourself short. The fact that the site had the AUARs would really put you on the map. As we're seeing a lot more developments now looking for million square foot plus, AUARs are becoming a big question. I know you said they're really hard, but just in terms of going forward with that, was the council supportive? Was it a dollars and cents thing? Just as we're running out of sites with AUARs, so we'd love to see some more.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Just for those at home, the question was, from a community standpoint, how did you build support for those pre-planning exercises, AUARs, environmental reviews as a whole? And the comment was, are you selling yourself short on those pre-planning based on probably my previous comments about the AUAR and EAW process? Without a doubt, if you have land area that could support large uses, you need to do the EAW or AUAR process up front. Do it as soon as possible, or you will not be able to check a box and you won't move forward from a site selector standpoint, period. So if there's any decision-making process, if you want development in those areas for certain size uses, and that's what your vision is, or your council or your city's vision is, you need to do the appropriate environmental work in advance, or you will not move forward. The timelines that Dan and his fine crew and others will bring to you will be much shorter than you're comfortable with.
Don't blame me. It's the user's fault.
And that's just a known. So the timeline to do an AUAR and an EAW will not allow for you to engage with a user, get them on board, and bring that to the finish line. So if your community has land that could support that use, do the appropriate environmental review up front so that you can be attractive to site selectors. The point that I was trying to make as part of those decisions within an EAW and AUA process is study it smart. Study it with as many different variables that you can so that you don't get locked into a certain amount of infrastructure and unintended consequences. That's what we learned. We learned that we need to study different patterns within that AUAR or EAW process when we can, because you may end up with a 125,000 square foot use with half of it being clean room space and half of it being office, which is a much different than a study of all e-commerce. So those types of things, how do you study that? And because it has major impacts on the infrastructure needs. So study kind of a high, medium, and low, if you will, to provide appropriate flexibility within that environmental review. But without a doubt, do the environmental review if you are trying to position for ultimate development.
Looks like there are two online questions from Dave. There are two Daves online, believe it or not, so I don't know which one this is, but I'll start. If you can read it with your supervision up there, I can't. But avoidance of the other uses for this area and Amazon/Prime or other such talks?
I think overall, we have a recent approval from a e-commerce type use. We do not know at this time who that tenant is. It's a 500,000 square foot e-commerce use. We also have, as Karl showed earlier on one of the plans, other sites, and we are anticipating additional warehouse distribution type uses because of the Northeast area's proximity to Interstate 94, 694, 494, and then obviously east to the Wisconsin markets and Chicago. So we do anticipate distribution uses to continue to be a part of the Northeast area. And we believe that as soon as this fall, we'll have a pretty significant e-commerce use in there with a to be released tenant.
And then a follow-up also from Dave. Also, what about the land investment by one of the casino holding companies in Lake Elmo or Bayton? Any movement on this possible user?
Those are not in the Woodbury jurisdiction, but it's on the north side of Interstate 94. We really have the same amount of information that probably anyone who's read newspaper articles on the topic. Our understanding is the Prairie Island Group has acquired that for purposes that they're figuring out. And from our standpoint, it really hasn't impacted any of our development patterns or decisions as it relates to what type of uses should or should not go into our Northeast area. But again, I'll reiterate the Northeast area being positioned so well for these types of light industrial warehouse distribution type uses. It really, that highest and best use exercise was really pretty straightforward as we moved through the 2040 comprehensive plan review.
Any other questions?
got to be another Dave question out there somewhere, right? Dave Johnson, come on, be a local Dave question.
All right, well, if not, thank you for being here today and listening to us. And, any of the four of us up here are happy to take any questions, email, call at any time.
Thank you.
All right, great panel. And if you haven't been to the Woodbury Cafe, great place for breakfast. Crab cakes Benedicts are pretty good. We're going to take a short break. We'll see you in a bit.
regrouping, checking, regrouping.
All right, ready to get going. If everybody wants to find their seats, we'll get on with our third panel today. As I'm doing that, the panelists can please come on up. I do not know who's moderating, but it's Minnesota Technology Corridor. We have Rachel Juba from the city of Hugo, Dan Undem from the city of Forest Lake, and Bruce Saylor from Connexus Energy. So let's please welcome these three individuals. We're going to be having Chris Ng from Washington County CDA moderate this.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Do you need something else? Thank you, Jay. And it's a privilege to be able to introduce this next panel. I know I'm not on the panel thing as a moderator, but I do want to just talk about how this new creative initiative actually came together real quickly. And okay, and just talk a little bit about the partnership. And Bruce is going to go into a little bit more detail and then introduce Rachel and Dan. But so this is the first time in my 30 years of experience in economic development that I've ever actually seen 2 counties and 5 cities and a whole bunch of private sector partners get together and try to promote a corridor for technology purposes. It's pretty creative. I would like to introduce Bruce Saylor from Connexus Energy, and then Bruce will introduce Rachel Juba from Hugo and Dan Undem from the city of Forest Lake. So do you want to go ahead and take it away? And then we've got a video for you to watch as well.
Thanks, Chris.
Bruce, please feel free.
Yes, please.
You want the video?
Not yet. So I have control?
Should. Just go slow.
Yep, we'll go slow. Okay, so this morning, what we're going to do is we're just going to cover a little bit of background on the technology corridor, how we got here, really the collaborative effort between Connexus Energy, the 2 counties, and the 5 different cities and the multiple players that Chris talked about. We're going to show a short video that really kind of encapsulates what the whole technology corridor is about, and then talk about a website that was developed just for this corridor. And then really excitingly, talk about what's really next that's coming up. So really how this began, it probably started about 3-4 years ago, where Connexus Energy would get different RFIs from either Greater MSP or DEED for various projects in our service territory. And they were all looking for similar things. They were looking for a high energy capacity network, definitely with redundant power systems, multiple utilities. They were looking for a strong fiber network. They were looking for available flat land that's developable with minimal ownership. They talked about needing a quality workforce, and really probably most importantly is collaboration. They wanted to come into an area that they could work with cities, they could work with counties to move projects along. And we decided back then is that instead of waiting for that phone to ring, we were going to proactively put together and promote this concept. So we took the idea to Anoka County and Washington County. It was great working with Chris and Anoka County on that. Talked about the idea, they brought it all up. They thought it was a great idea, so we reached back out to the 5 different cities. They thought it was a great idea, so we just kind of kept building this network of this collaboration forward. So we were able to launch the Minnesota Technology Corridor a couple years ago. And of course, during the pandemic, things slowed down just a little bit. So we're looking at relaunching this, talking about what's going to be coming up next. So really, we'll just go ahead and start with that video then, if we could, please. It's all about anticipation.
Maybe Bruce, while he's getting that loaded up, just talk a little bit about where the exact technology corridor is.
Oh, good point. It's really along 35, going through the city of Hugo up to Forest Lake, Columbus Township, Lino Lakes, and city of Centerville. So it's on the northeast side of the metro area. Good job.
High quality.
Thanks, Jane. So that video really just talks about the corridor, how it was put together, really the different sites. In addition to this, we also created a website, the minnesotatechnologycorridor.com, and we've got cards out in the booth outside if you want to take a look at it, just to go back to your office and take a look at those videos later on. But part of it really is getting ready. Again, looking at the different projects that were coming through, looking at the different projects that's going through, working with each of the cities, and Rachel and Dan will be talking about this a little bit more with their cities, but really it's about site readiness. What do we need to do to get ready? And for example, I know the city of Forest Lake has already gone through the phase 1 environmental for their site. They're looking at wetland delineation, and they've also done LiDAR imaging. The city of Centerville has actually done a financial analysis of what it would take to put a data center on their site. What is the financial incentive to do that? And it came out very positive. And a lot of these studies can be moved to each of the 5 different cities in the area. So we're pretty excited that each of the cities are stepping up to the plate. They're doing more work just to get things ready as things move on. One more to go. Oop. One backwards. There we go. So really what's next? Before I turn it over to Rachel, we're really looking at relaunching this entire initiative on the tech corridor. So we plan on aggressively promoting this region to a national audience, looking at some national site selectors moving on. We're also going to leverage our relationship with Greater MSP and D just to make sure that they're aware of this technology corridor, what we have to offer. And really, we're going to go back and really start targeting some site selectors too. So besides putting in some national advertising in National Site Selector magazine, we're going to be reaching out to some select site selectors for 2 reasons. One is to talk about the corridor, but also second is to get their feedback. To take a look at the sites to say, okay, of these sites, what else needs to be done to be that ready, to have that pad ready so we can start moving things forward as time goes on. So again, we have a collaborative effort with this entire region to look at, looking to attract tech companies, not just data centers, but high precision manufacturing that's really looking at that high energy capacity network that they need to move on, high bandwidth that has that fiber, talented workforce, and it's close to the MSP airport. So it's really the sweet spot for tech companies that we're looking to attract in this region. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rachel Juba from the city of Hugo to talk about her city.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Bruce. I'm Rachel Juba. I'm the Community Development Director with the City of Hugo. I've been there for almost 15 years and held various planning positions in the city. One thing that I'd like to note is that the technology corridor, the idea came from Connexus and Anoka County and Washington County, and it was brought to the 5 cities in the area, and we really thought it was a great idea. But we also in that area have a strong partnership. We have the 35E coalition, and that helped get an interchange at County Road 14 and 35E back probably about 15, 14 years ago. And that really opened up this area to be available and attractive for a place for a technology corridor like this. So we're just continuing with our strong partnerships with our adjacent communities and counties. We also had a strong partnership with Connexus Energy and Excel Energy, since both of those providers do serve the city of Hugo and this area of the metropolitan area. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what Hugo is and where Hugo is, how many people know where Hugo is? 15 years ago when I started, I don't think I got that many hands. So most people say it's almost to Duluth.
Tell them what they used to call it.
I'd rather not. Yeah, you're from White Bear Lake, so you know the acronym. So the population's almost 16,000. We've nearly tripled over the last 20 years. The median home income is 89,000, close to 90,000. We're urban and rural living. So the west portion of the city of Hugo is the developing portion of the city of Hugo, and it has city sewer and water available. The eastern portion is agricultural and rural residential, and will remain that way for some time. We are 35 miles north of downtown St. Paul and about 20 minutes to get to the Minneapolis airport. So I just wanted to showcase a piece of property in Hugo that we picked to showcase for the technology corridor website. Although Hugo does not have property along 35E, we are very close and have great access. And we picked this site because of its access to Highway 61 and proximity to 35E. So you can easily get there with any distribution trucks or any employees that need to get there. So this site is 75 acres located at the southwest corner of 165th Street and Highway 61. When we initially identified this site, we knew that it had some challenges, it did not have any city sewer and water at the time. And so we did get a grant from Washington County. It was a pre-development grant to do an infrastructure study. So we analyzed and evaluated the city sewer and water availability and also street construction. How can that happen? And the reason why we did that is the comp plan had the sewer coming from the north, which it wasn't available yet, and the water coming from the south, and that was available. And so we were trying to figure out how do we have this be an attractive place for the technology corridor or industrial development, in fact. And with this study, we determined that there's an alternate way to serve this property with city sewer and water. And that just came to fruition. There's a residential development that's happening just to the west side that just got approved and is platted now, which is going to have a trunk sewer and water main to this piece of property. So once that is installed this year, this piece of property will be opened up for development for industrial and for the technology corridor. So this property is zoned industrial. It does have robust fiber capacity within Highway 61. We've talked to all the major providers, and they've indicated that there is plenty of capacity for any large data user. It does have excellent power capacity and redundancy. This is the area where they're served by Connexus Energy and Excel Energy. There's kind of a line like right between this property, so it'd be easy for them to have redundant power. And that is the only piece of property in Hugo right now that we have as in the industrial area for the technology corridor. But I'll just talk a little bit more about the city of Hugo. We do have 2 other industrial parks that do have properties available. They're served by rail, and it is a team track. That's a public team track. So anybody that owns a business in the city of Hugo can receive goods and send goods on the rail. We do have a flexible business park zoning district, which is kind of a catch-all and allows us to be really flexible with the types of users that are in there. So it could be a warehouse user, distribution center, data center, commercial uses, restaurants. So we're trying to be pretty flexible with those uses. We do have several commercial sites available along County Road 8, and that has vehicle trips per day, about 20,000 vehicle trips. We are doing an area study along County Road 8 right now because the commercial retail areas are a lot different than they were pre-COVID. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in those areas. The population within a 10-mile radius is about 200,000. One of the other things to talk about is that there's been several businesses in the community that have expanded over the years, and we see this as a sign that the Hugo economy is doing very well. Schweder's Companies is in Hugo. They own 6 buildings right now, and they just built 2 buildings in the last 2 years, totaling approximately 175,000 square feet, and they are building another 50,000 square foot building this year. There is also initiative from our Economic Development Authority for downtown Hugo along Highway 61 between 145th Street and 147th Street was, I wouldn't say historic downtown, but that's where people shopped and ate in over 30 years ago probably. And there's been an initiative to kind of revitalize that. So we've been working with a developer, Dennis Properties, to develop that property. And the images are on the right-hand side of the slide. But if you go to downtownhugo.com, you'll find all of the images and concept plans for that. So he's been actively marketing that area, and hopefully will go through the Planning Commission City Council beginning of September. So a little bit more on the construction projects. These are the construction projects that have happened even during the pandemic. So we've been pretty happy with our commercial industrial development. Schweder's built their 27,000 square foot building. We have White Bear Lake area school district had the record breaking 365 million bond referendum that passed last year. And so they're building 100,000 square foot new elementary school in Hugo, in addition to the 2 other elementary schools, as well as a transportation facility at around 15,000 square feet. We've had commercial business expansion for a total of 20,000 square feet. And then Heartland Credit Union entered the community and built a small building in our Victor Gardens residential neighborhood. Hugo's been busy with residential development. We have a lot of phases that have completed a lot of residential developments that have completed their final phases, with putting on over 150 new lots available. And then we had 3 new residential projects come through over the last year. Meadows at Hugo, which is 90 units, and that is Centra Homes. Rice Lake Meadows, which is Rice Lake Reserve, which is MI Homes, and that's 97 units. And then Jack Pine Place Apartments, and that is an 84 unit building. And that's a very interesting project. It's not a large apartment building. It is 7 12 unit buildings located next to City Hall and Lions Park. If you have a chance to just go to jackpineplace.com, it's an interesting concept. It's kind of supposed to be the missing middle concept that everybody's been talking about for housing. And so we're excited for that project to be completed, and they are leasing at the end of this month. So a few things for business resources that our Economic Development Authority likes to talk about with businesses is that staff can get you through the development process quickly and efficiently. We have an example of Excel Energy's training center is located in the city of Hugo, and their building budget is really based on their revenues for the year. And so in October, they started talking about wanting to come in and build a training center, but they needed approval before the end of December of that year. And so they ended up submitting a very good plan. And in the beginning of November, they had good engineers and architects that they hired, and we got them through the approval process within 45 days. We do have low tax rates in the city of Hugo. We don't have park dedication fees for commercial industrial development. We don't require trunk sewer charges for redevelopment sites. So if the site previously had a building on it, we would not charge you the trunk sewer or water charges for that. We do have an economic development assessment policy for infrastructure improvements. And we also would like to advertise the Washington County Open to Business program, which was very helpful during the pandemic with our businesses that needed grants, because the county was administering all of those grant programs for our businesses and using the Open to Business program to go through that. And then this is just my contact information. We can talk maybe a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation, but I'd like to introduce Dan from Forest Lake.
Thanks. My name is Dan Undem. I'm the Assistant City Administrator with the City of Forest Lake. I've been with the city long enough that when I started, I had more hair and it wasn't gray. So been there quite a while. I'm here really today to talk about the city's involvement in the technology corridor. And to kind of echo what's been already said is that I really do want to highlight the unique partnership that we have here. I've been involved in government for over a decade, and this is the first partnership where I've seen so many various agencies at county level, city level, private sector, all working together to not only share resources, but share knowledge and row the boat in the same direction. So there's a lot of excitement, in my opinion, in this corridor, and it's something that everybody in this room should really watch now and in the future. From a local government perspective on the corridor, I think one thing that I want to mention is that one advantage that you have by working with the governments or the agencies in the technology corridor is that most of the boards and commissions, the people who make the approvals on the projects are aware of what type of projects this corridor could land. When I first started working with my EDA, Planning Commission, and City Council on the technology corridor, I said, well, we're looking at a data center, because that's what we kind of started with. That was sort of our first project. And nobody in the room knew what a data center was. They were like, what does that look like? What do they do? You know, what kind of building goes there? What's the demand on your city resources? So we spent a lot of time going through that process. I mean, even myself, when somebody said a data center, I wouldn't have really known what that looked like. But all of our boards and commissions are up to speed. So if I go in there right now and I say a data center, they know exactly what that project is. So when you come with that project to our boards and commissions, you're not having to spend time to sort of provide that background on it. The boards and commissions are they're going to be able to make decisions quicker. So your time to market is going to be faster by coming in and working with those partnership or those cities and counties that are in the corridor. I unfortunately do not have a PowerPoint presentation today, so I'm going to have to do this like I used to tell my daughter when she was a toddler, and just use my words so I don't have pretty pictures. But for those of you who are remote, all of the information that I'm sharing today is on the website that we have for economic development in the city, which is investinforestlake.com. So if you do want to see the site, go to investinforestlake.com, click on the Headwaters 123, and all of our information is there. And anybody in the room, I do have some cut sheets out on the table out front as well, specific to our Headwaters site. What I really want to focus on now is the city's site that we do have included in the technology corridor. A little bit of background on how this site got selected. Back, I believe it was in 2018, we did a tabletop exercise where we sort of envisioned, let's say somebody comes to the city and says, I want to site a data center within the city, where's it going to go? And it was a kind of an eye-opening experience to try to figure out what land do we have available for that? Where does it fit? What's the best use for it? And we ended up narrowing it down to a couple of sites. And at the end, the Headwaters site really rose to the top. You know, and again, full disclosure, I work in government. I'm not a developer, so I looked at this from a government perspective. But the Headwaters site, it just had something about it that the gut feeling was like, this is a good site for us to pursue. It's a 123-acre site. It's fully city owned, so city has full control over the full 123 acres. And as we started going through what data centers need, we realized not all sites are going to need the full 123. So we are open to also subdividing this out as needed for projects. As I mentioned, you know, my background's in government. You know, I'm not the market expert in terms of what data centers or technology companies need. So what we started to do was, what kind of studies can we do? How can we study the site within the corridor to make sure that it is in the right market, that we are positioning this in the right market space? So we started, you know, exploring what options that we have available. And I think it's key for me to explain that when we started doing the studies for this site, we kept an open mind. We realized that, you know, we could do 2 studies in and realize, you know what, this isn't a fit for technology. So we were willing to pivot to what the actual results of the studies were. We went in with a very open mind and we're willing to pivot based on the results of our study, because we didn't want to try to push a square peg into a round hole, particularly with this site. So we looked at what kind of studies can we do to gain some market certainty, but also to try to minimize some risks, those unknowns, make the unknowns known to potential developers. So one of the first things that we did do was a phase 1 environmental study on the site that has been completed. We also did a wetland delineation because obviously if the site's full of wetlands, it may not be a best fit for, we may say it's 123 acres, but only 10 of them are developable. We wanted to know that going on. Both those studies came back and there was no skeletons in the closet. The results were, conducive to technology development. So we kind of continued on that pathway. A cool thing that we did do as well was we did LiDAR imaging of the site. So we had a drone fly the site and created a LiDAR image of the site. What's really neat about this is that we now have a digital file, which I really wish I could show you because it's pretty cool, but you just have to kind of, use your imagination as to what it looks like. But it's actually a 3D model that you can fly through of the site based on the actual contours there. And what this file you can do with it is that you can actually also bring this to a design team and they can actually start to design the building on the site using the actual site conditions. So if you're looking at saying, I got this kind of vision for what the site looks, or my design, would it fit on the site? We do have that LiDAR imagery, that digital file that you can start doing some layouts and some specing on, in a digital environment. And those conditions were, I think that was flown 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's a current file. We've also done all the title work on it. So we did all the title work. So all that has been completed as well. One thing that we did do that I thought was, this is sort of where we really identified that this site really does fit that, that technology niche, is that we worked with Great River Energy and they have some scoring criteria that they use with Deloitte Energy or Deloitte Consulting as sort of a pre-flight checklist. Is this site, does it meet, what a technology company would need from a site selector standpoint, or does it not? And we gave that a hard analysis. And at the end of the day, it did score very high on that. I mean, there's a few things that we could do to make it score better, but overall the scoring came back very conducive to technology. So again, we feel that we are in the right market space with this headwater parcel. And from a developer standpoint, we have utilities on site, sewer and water are site adjacent. All of the road infrastructure to the site is already there. And in terms of shovel ready, the site is probably about as shovel ready as you're going to see, in terms of the technology corridor. It does have redundant power as well. So we do have that redundant power provider. We have robust fiber capacity. There are multiple fiber providers just site adjacent. And again, I wish I had the map to show you where it was. It has easy access to main transportation corridors. It's right off Highway 61, just south of Highway 97, and a stone's throw away from I-35. So it's right on some great transportation corridors. It is 30 minutes to either downtown St. Paul or Minneapolis, and it's not in Canada. Some people think Forest Lake is in Canada. We are not Canada. And that 30 minutes is actually verified, not just with the old school, drop a pin in the middle and do a 30-mile, circle around it. I actually went to a website that will do current travel time. So you drop a pin and it'll show you every road that will get you where you can get within 30 minutes based on current travel conditions. And when I put it in St. Paul and I put that pin in downtown Minneapolis, this site did hit that 30-minute travel time. So it's legitimately within a 30-minute window to either downtown. We also have a municipal airport. Not a lot of cities have that municipal airport. So I know a lot of tech CEOs want to fly in. Unfortunately, if they're going to use the Forest Lakes Airport, they got to use a Cessna and not the Lear jets. But we do have an airport that's, right across the street from this site. So it has great transportation options as well. And like I said, all of the site information and the studies as well are on investinforestlake.com. So we do make those available to those who are interested in learning more about the site. Outside of that site, people always ask me all the time, why Forest Lake? What's so special about Forest Lake? And I think one thing that I like to tell people is that in the city of Forest Lake, we want to partner with business. We're willing to listen, to entertain ideas, to work together to find common solutions. One of the things that I've heard consistently when I talk to businesses, both local, regional, and national businesses, the number one issue that they're facing is workforce recruitment. I hear that time and time again. That is the biggest challenge that they have. And in fact, I was on a conference call a couple of weeks ago that they discussed this recent Minnesota Chamber Foundation put out a study, Minnesota Workforce through 2030, and they identified this as the biggest issue that employers are facing over the next 10 years. And in fact, they're actually saying that Minnesota's job growth could actually be stunted by the fact that we can't get employees to fill the position. So we may actually have sort of an economic stall, not based on the, we'll have jobs. We just won't have people to fill them. So those jobs will have to go out state. So this is a very critical issue. And I do want to tell businesses that we are here to help. I've identified this on the EDA's current work plan. This has been on there for the past 2 years. When I went back as we were going through a revision to that plan, I did let the EDA know that this is probably the biggest issue that we have to address. This is the biggest nut for us to crack. But it is a tough issue for us to get our arms around, especially from a government perspective. We are sort of limited in terms of what we can do. But our EDA is fully committed to supporting whatever we can do to help support workforce retention and attraction. One thing that we are doing currently is we are partnering with the Forest Lake School System. They have a career launch program, which takes high school kids, I believe they're seniors, and prepares them with local businesses and an opportunity to sort of train to work. When I was in high school, it's called work study. You'd leave school early, go work. But it's since evolved where now they're actually taking students out, putting them in high-tech manufacturing jobs, giving them that on-the-job training. And these companies that are involved in this are now starting to prime that pump for when those kids come back out of tech school or get their degrees, they have a job waiting for them. So they're starting to work, this career launch program is starting to help address this workforce recruitment side. And here at the city, we do as much as we can to support that program. Another thing that we also do is that we're currently doing our downtown planning. So we think as part of workforce attraction is to have an inviting downtown, have things for the residents to do outside of the 8 to 4:30. So we're currently doing a downtown planning study. Forest Lake does have what I would call a unique sort of historic downtown right along 61. We're currently engaged with the planning firm to really look at the current state of what our downtown looks like, but also envision what it can be in the next 10, 15, 20 years. How can we activate those spaces? How can we create, improve quality of life for residents? How can we create, from a government standpoint, better activation? Can we do more events downtown? How do we support the hospitality industry? So there are restaurants and bars and places for residents to go. So that downtown planning study right now, we are just in the feedback collection stage of that, but we're hoping to get that approved in early 22. I lost a year because of 20, so I'm always a year back. But in early 22, we're hoping to get that plan finalized and approved and then begin execution on that. And we do have a lot of support from right now the City Council and EDA on making that happen. So there's a lot of political support for these programs as well. We've also seen some recent development. There's the former Hool site there on the corner of Highway 61 and Broadway that was recently purchased by Gertens. They're doing a nice, they're making some improvements to that site. They're going to do a greenhouse space down there, which we feel will help to bring people to our downtown area, which will help to activate those spaces. We've also had a lot of, residential development from both a single family perspective and a multifamily perspective. So there's a lot of activities happening within the city of Forest Lake. So just as I sort of wrap up here, I really want to stress from everybody in this room and watching online is to really watch the Minnesota Technology Corridor. I think this corridor, there's going to be a lot of exciting opportunities that come out of this in the near future here. And also, if you have any questions on technology or data center development or tech development, there's a lot of experience. We've been through a lot of meetings and been through a lot of trainings. Feel free to reach out. We are happy to share our knowledge, answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to tap our expertise in the corridor. We're probably not I wouldn't say that we're PhDs, but I think we're graduate students in terms of what we know about technology. And again, I'm happy to have any follow-up conversations, answer any questions anybody here or online has about the technology corridor or the city of Forest Lake. And again, I apologize for not having an actual presentation. I had half thought about bringing a picture of my dog to show, but I couldn't find one in such short notice. So apologize for that. And I appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Well, I think that wraps up pretty much the formal part of the presentation. Is there any questions people have, either online or here on the technology corridor? Okay.
You talked about the focus on cooperation and not competitiveness between the cities, the counties, the providers like Excel Energy or the many different fiber providers that are in that corridor that provide that service on a redundant basis. Can you talk a little bit about how that's worked and how are the communities receiving that cooperation?
I think I'll maybe start. I think one of our first kickoff meetings we had with the entire group, we had 4 or 5 different cable providers, and the thought was, ooh, this could be a bad meeting. They're all going to be in their own separate, corners and stuff like that. But it wasn't like that. They were sitting right next to each other. They were talking about, what they have available and what they can offer. So, I mean, right from the get-go, I think the meetings went extremely well and very positive. So I don't know what you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that was a big discussion topic with this technology corridor of us coming together and really showcasing sites available in several communities. And of course, we're gonna, if something comes to our community, we're gonna want it in our community. But if it happens to go in Forest Lake, I'm not gonna be mad at Dan. I'm actually gonna be happy because it's probably gonna bring something to the city of Hugo too. So we've had a lot of conversations about there's not gonna be animosity if something goes somewhere else. We are gonna, make sure that we're excited for the communities, and if there's any way that we can help them as well, we'll do that. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Dan.
Yeah, I would echo, though, I would fight you tooth and nail. No, I'm just, and I think that is the key point of this technology corridor is that collaboration where, again, I think when we put our site out there and everybody puts their other sites out there, obviously there's, I think historically cities have sort of fought each other for these sites. And these are one where, we're going to try to, if somebody comes in with a specific project and needs a site and our site doesn't meet the spec that you guys need, I'll refer you to Rachel in Hugo or a member city within the corridor. And I think that collaboration, because again, if it lands in Centerville, lands in Lionel, lands in Forest Lake, as long as it's within the corridor, that's a win for the corridor. And I think we're committed to make the corridor successful. And like I said, we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. And I've never been in an agency or in a partnership that's been for over 3+ years where that continues to be the day in, day out. Every meeting seems like it's more and more, we're rolling faster and faster in the right direction. And that's just very unique in my experience.
I got a couple of city questions. I know I was teasing a little bit about Hugo, but we actually love it. We'll probably be there. But that multifamily project, the Jack Pine, where did you get that name?
I have no clue. It used to be called Hugo Gardens and I preferred Hugo Gardens, but I guess they hired some sort of branding firm that needed to change the name, of course. And now it's Jack Pine Place. There's not a Jack Pine in sight. I have no clue.
Well, that's why I asked, because the only Jack Pine I know is the White Bear brew house or local tap room that has Jack Pine beer.
Oh, you know what? I don't know. So the developer does have a project in Matamidi. He is from Edina, but I don't know if he has any local ties or not, but I mean, he's doing projects up in the Northeast area.
And then question for Forest Lake, is it's hard to get on Forest Lake to live than it is White Bear? I'm sick of trying. I don't want to spend $1 million.
That's just a testament to how hot our market is right now. Get in while you can, right?
You can't get in.
I know. It's a great lake.
Yes.
Do you guys have projections on total new employment over the next 10 years, specifically in technology, and then any of the ancillary or supportive businesses that will also be spurred on by that new employment?
I guess the question was, employment projections on the technology side of it. Have we done any projections on that? And not that I'm aware of at this time.
In Forest Lake, we haven't. I mean, it's going to depend on what type of project lands. I mean, a data center is relatively low employer, but if you have a high-tech manufacturing firm, those can bring, a lot more employees to the mix. We are looking at probably doing a labor shed study to try to get some of those numbers there. But right now, anything that you would have would be purely speculative or, kind of dependent upon what sites or what projects are coming to the fore.
So if you have a data center land, is the benefit there just to your tax basis? Or why would you be wanting to attract data centers to your area?
Yeah, the question is, why would we just want a data center there? Or is it just for the tax base or is it for others? The one thing about data centers, yes, it's a tax base, great energy usage from the utility perspective. Not a lot of jobs, but a lot of good high paying jobs, but it's also the other businesses that come in right next to it. I think if you look at other data center projects that's gone on throughout the US, once they start landing the data center, there's other things going on to help those employees there, from the housing market to the retail market to everything else. So I think there's a lot of ancillary services that come along that.
Yeah.
And I think to that point as well, in terms of, it's sort of like data center technology companies, once they typically land, they're sort of birds of a feather, because there is such a very tight criteria in terms of what they need. They need redundant fiber, redundant power, and that's not available everywhere. They need a relatively stable, safe site. So once they've identified sort of a region or a corridor, they'll tend to land there. And there is always, if you look at some other, I can't think of the names of the communities, but I've had tech companies land, is that you do see a lot of secondary and tertiary development that happens around those sites to support those. So while the initial data center may be a low job creator, I think that secondary and tertiary development, definitely does bring jobs to the market.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the more exciting businesses that we could get are the engineering firms that need a lot of data, or the research and development types of businesses that would locate there. That's the exciting portion of it. I don't know that when we talk to our ED about data centers, like Dan said, they're like, what is that? That's not exciting to them, even though you'll have a handful of high paid employers. They're more excited about the other businesses that come along with it.
Yeah,
I think just to close that out too, on the data center side, we really started this in 2018, probably focused on data centers, because that was really sort of the hot topic at the time. That was sort of the hot market. And we've since expanded, like high-tech manufacturing, it's R&D, it's, other, uses like medical reads, like you have a radiology firm that needs high fiber capacity so they can have their radiologists on site there reading, x-rays from all over the country. That type of stuff is what we're really sourcing at this point. So it's expanded just beyond data centers at this point.
Yep.
I'm just curious what the projected timeline is for it to reach Forest Lake. You got a bunch of benchmarks along the way. I missed that.
Could you repeat that, please?
The projected timeline for the corridor to be up to Forest Lake.
The question was the timeline for the corridor to be up to Forest Lake. You're talking about
Working through to Forest Lake, correct?
the corridor itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there now. The Forest Lake is in that technology corridor.
I think what she's asking, if I can maybe clarify a little bit. So not all of the properties that are within the technology corridor are adjacent to each other, and they're probably going to be served by city sewer and water in a little bit different way, depending on where they are. So the projects can happen probably in any city that's in the technology corridor right now. They don't have to go, it doesn't have to first happen in Lino and then in Hugo and then in Forest Lake. A lot of the properties are served independently.
Yes, Chris. Sure.
In regards to the talent, I know that is a major concern of companies in general, not only the existing companies we're working with, but those that we're looking at attracting and helping expand. And Dan mentioned the partnership with the Forest Lake High School and Career Launch Program, but we also have a partnership with the University of Minnesota, who offers a computer coding bootcamp program, which is phenomenal. And we've had early discussions with them and the partner of the corridor. But Bruce, maybe I could ask a question related to the incentives in the study that was just done in the corridor. I believe it was focusing on the city of Centerville, but we're also looking at Forest Lake and Hugo now to do that same study. Can you talk a little bit about the advantages to a company to be in the corridor?
Sure.
As we identified in that study, and can that study be found online anywhere?
Yep. Okay. Chris was talking about a study that was done with the city of Centerville. And it's through Excipio. And what they did is they did a financial analysis, and this was just of a data center. So they really looked at, why a data center located in this area. So they looked at disaster areas throughout the US and things like that, the redundant fiber, the redundant energy side of it, but really did a deep dive into the tax incentives and the other incentives that DEED offers. And one of the great incentives that the state of Minnesota has, the tax incentive on data centers and the equipment that goes in there. So besides having one of the lowest energy rates in the Midwest, when you tie in the incentives from the state and through DEED and everything else, it is operating at one of the most cost-effective areas to put a data center. So if anybody's interested in that study, just grab a card out on the desk and shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to send that out to you. But It ended up to be one of the most cost-effective place to put a data center or a technology company. And it's not just on that one site in Centerville. The same holds true for Hugo. The same holds true for the city of Forest Lake. So we're excited to do that study. It's just one more step to make it into that readiness area.
If I could just circle back quickly on the workforce retention and attraction portion of it, I think when people look at Forest Lake and Hugo, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when they look at our area in general, they always think recruitment comes from the cities. So we're always looking for talent coming out from Minneapolis and St. Paul. I've always argued also look towards the northeast, towards central Minnesota and western Wisconsin. We're located in an area where if you're going to recruit, you have access to a market that Minneapolis and St. Paul don't. You know, you have people from central Minnesota that would commute into St. Paul, but, or excuse me, into Forest Lake or Hugo, but they're not probably going to go all the way into St. Paul, Minneapolis. So some of the firms that have landed in Forest Lake have actually mentioned the fact that they have an easier time recruiting in Forest Lake because of that ability to sort of take that lens and turn it around 180 and recruit in a market where there's less competition. And if they're able to, you know, recruit well, and they've had good retention as a result of that as well, because again, those employees don't want to go into Minneapolis and St. Paul. They sort of like being able to easy country road commute into Forest Lake or Hugo.
Yeah, and as a planner, I'll just add this, and I think that, you know, Dan, maybe you can talk about your planning, but, you know, one of the items that the city council and the EDA have also been working on is just creating great neighborhoods for people to live in. And so creating these great spaces where people want to come in and live in your community can also attract a workforce. And if you're creating some place that they want to live and create places that they want to work, they'll be in your community.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it. I think we're ready for Jade.
Thanks, guys. Great panel. Good stuff. Two great communities too. So let's move on. We got one final panel before we're headed out for the day. Cottage Grove Southeast Development Industrial Park, and I have Christine Costello from the city of Cottage Grove, and also Phil from Opus. So let's welcome both of them.
Good to see you.
We'll keep it casual.
Sounds good.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody. My name is Christine Costello. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Cottage Grove. And I was joking earlier that, gosh, gotta go last. I hate that and would just like to say ditto, but maybe it makes sense. We are the southernmost community here in Washington County. And if I could ask for the PowerPoint slides to be brought up.
And while you're doing that, I can introduce myself. I'm Phil Catnow with Opus. I'm with the real estate development team at Opus. Responsibilities kind of for the Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and the Dakota markets. And even though we're last, we'll liven it up and we'll make it a lot of fun. So all those sitting at home, as well as all those here, can get a jump on the day when we're done here. Oh.
Yeah, feel free to ask us questions anytime. You can interrupt us. Not a problem. I had snazzy graphics.
I got a question for Phil on industrial development. I participate passively in the industrial development market. Smaller investors or smaller developers right now, it seems difficult because of the lead times now, because of you have to order steel so far out. And it seems like, have you all had a competitive advantage because of your ability to plan, you know, on a year's time scale instead of a month's time scale?
Sure. That's a great question. I'll maybe, you know, it's almost a good segue to talk, because I think it feeds right into what we'll be talking about. I think we have to rewind, you know, kind of a year and a half, right? We all remember what happened, you know, spring of 20, when everything kind of changed, and who would have thought there'd still be, you know, virtual as we sit here today. But two dynamics took place. One, nobody knew what was going to happen, so everyone kind of just paused, and they said, we don't want to be long on inventory, we don't want to be long on product.
we just need to figure out what's happening. And I'd say that probably, and it's not uniform, all right? Other asset categories, office is still working in a quasi, remote work area. I think all of us are, well, as a proud father of 6 magical kids, I can't wait for school to start again. And I hope they're all in school. If my wife was here, she'd be cheering even louder for that statement. But what we did find very quickly was that the industrial segment, in contrast to just about any other, with exception of probably certainly medical and the first line responders, that it was deemed essential. And a lot of the industrial kind of stayed working. And ironically, so did Opus. And even though we weren't really in the office, our construction teams were out on the job sites and they didn't really miss a day. And with that pause, what happened was 2 things. One, we look at what are the drivers right now for industrial, right? I mean, I think it's undeniable. The influence that e-commerce has had on the industry has created a tremendous amount of demand. I think we've also just seen that the supply chain choppiness and maybe having some resilience in your supply chain, i.e. no longer just-in-time delivery is always going to work for every business model, thus additional demand on warehousing. Couple that with a lot of groups have gone to third-party providers, or 3PL as sometimes you'll hear, where they don't want to be in charge of the logistical distributions. And then you add on top of that, everyone stopped. Now all these developers are seeing these imbalances, and customers or clients are needing new facilities. And that very quickly then manifested itself in you have a shortage of supply, you have a huge amount of demand, and you can't just snap of the finger turn steel mills back on. And what we're seeing is the lead times are getting pushed out further and further because everyone stopped. No inventory was being made. Now everyone's going again, and the inventory can't catch up fast enough. Right now, the question of how are we hedging our bets as Opus, what we are doing is, as a vertically integrated developer, which we have a design and construction all organic to Opus, we are designing our steel and precast packages, which are the longest lead time items for our industrial deliveries, a lot earlier in the process, oftentimes before we're even fully entitled, because then we can get in the proverbial line for making a steel order. And we, in the past, would never do it that quickly. But in order for us right now, today, if you want to get steel, you're not going to see it. If we order this afternoon, you won't see it until probably May of next year. Roofing material is all of a sudden even further out. Dock packages we're hearing upwards of 30, 32 weeks out. These are kind of core fundamental ingredients that you can't go without if you want to have an industrial building. And those of us that continue to go forward, and I don't want to say that we were any smarter than anyone else at Opus, when we own land, we're going to put up buildings because we don't like to sit on a lot of land. We continue forward with some of our projects, and we are being rewarded by having that precious amount of inventory in the space right now. But as we sit today across kind of the region that I just described earlier, we've got one building that's at lease right now that as soon as that lease is signed, we are out of any effective inventory that we have available. So if you showed up today saying money's no option, I need space, I don't quite have it yet. Fortunately, we're getting ready to kick off 2 new spec industrial projects, in the next handful of weeks in the Twin Cities market. And but to answer your earlier question, what are we doing? We're making commitments earlier in the process than normal to provide that certainty of outcome for our clients. And I think we've also found that clients right now, speed to market and that certainty of execution almost supersedes the price volatility that we're all experiencing. And I think we're going to probably continue to face some of this choppiness in the supply chain because we're not hearing anything that is going to be indicative of it catching up here in the foreseeable future. Certainly.
Follow up to that. Then does that, probably not fair to ask, but does that allow you to push rents a little bit, and the Blackstone deal, or?
So you said probably the magic word. I would say that Minneapolis in general has been a very fractured marketplace when it comes to the ownership of industrial real estate. Over the years, there's been a lot of local owners that own portfolios that would continue to really seek occupancy in lieu of pushing rates. And a lot of groups had always said, we're seeing nationally, and one of the benefits that we have as Opus is on our national platform, our Chicago offices, our Indy offices, our Phoenix offices, we're seeing tremendous amounts of rent growth that we weren't quite experiencing here in the Twin Cities. A couple of years ago, 2 large portfolio acquisitions took place with Link Blackstone, and they have not ceased any appetite for growing their portfolio holding here in the Twin Cities. And with that came that concentration of ownership, and in turn, that ability to start putting upward pressure on pricing for rents. Now you couple that with setting aside the lead time challenges that we have, you also have just the year-over-year inflationary cost for construction. That continues to put upward pressure on just the total cost of building new buildings. But we've also found that the community of renters that are out there that are looking to relocate from a talent and recruitment and retention aspect are looking at the new functional efficiencies that new industrial product brings, greater daylighting, higher clear heights, more functional docking. They can find and justify those incremental costs because in the grand scheme of things, industrial from just a binary cost per square foot is a lot lower than just about any other asset category. So to answer your question, concentration of ownership coupled with the desire and flight to quality for new product, as well as then finally the amount of appetite for the institutional investors to buy industrial real estate, which has shown its resiliency going through the pandemic, has never been higher. That's a perfect storm for higher rents, lower cap rates, and the math continues to work. And if you were to say what's going to disrupt it, because it can't always be just sunny and rosy, I think probably the biggest thing that disrupts it, like any quality asset category, the community will continue to force doing more and more of it and overbuild it. I think the reality, though, is some of the structural challenges coupled with lead times, as well as buying large greenfield sites that are well located to connectivity nodes and great access, finally coupled with labor, which we're going to talk about a little bit, and a lot of the panels have talked about. All of those are going to end up being governors towards overbuilding. I get it. I'm not trying to sit here and say it's never going to end. At some point, there will be some shifts there. But structurally speaking, right now, it seems like the runway that we're going to experience for industrial is going to go on for quite a significant amount of time.
So I'll go ahead and share some background information about Cottage Grove, and then we'll get into our business park and our relationship with Opus and developments that they've done in our community. So our current population is about 38,000. And as you can see, our 2030 estimates is a little over 42,000. We feel like we're going to exceed that before 2030. For example, we are seeing tremendous growth in our residential market. In 2020, we did 302 permits for both single family and townhome development. As of June of this year, we've already done 310 permits for single family and townhomes. Overall, probably 8 to 10 years ago, we platted maybe 40 lots. This year, we're assuming we're going to plat around 700 lots for residential development. We also have our first apartment building market rate. We're really excited since the mid-90s in Cottage Grove. So that'll open this fall. And then Appadan has a project for another 171 units of market rate multifamily that'll also be coming into the community. They received their approvals last year, waited with COVID due to construction costs. We hope that they'll start construction next year. So we're really excited to see the growth. Our neighbor to the north, Woodbury, I would say our borders definitely are blurred. You don't know these days if you're going from Cottage Grove to Woodbury. So it's really great to see the development. It's something our elected officials have really wanted. Additionally, we have a high medium household income. We're at 102,000. We're about 22 minutes from the airport. Highway 6110 runs right through the middle of the community. We're about 4 miles from 494 and 9 miles from 94, depending on how fast you drive. So if you're driving my speed, that or sooner. In terms of workforce, and this is what I think you've heard from all the communities. So about 95% of our residents have their high school diploma in some form of college. And then about 31% have that bachelor's degree and some additional college education. Our business park, definitely our strength is in manufacturing. We have a number of businesses, 3M, Renewal by Anderson, which Opus worked on. They recently completed their expansion. Was that last year?
Just last year, right through COVID.
Yeah, so we tried to work very quickly. And Renewal by Anderson is almost doubled their workforce. It's a little over 1,000 employees. And I know one of the things we do for economic development is create videos and post them to our website. They currently have 300 openings. So that's additionally goes to that workforce question. We conduct business retention and expansion surveys with our industrial businesses, and that helps us as a city to know what the concerns are. And what we hear from those businesses is that skilled labor. So for us and for you, it's educating our school systems that four-year college is great, but it's not for everybody. And you can make a great living with a two-year degree in skilled labor, CNA, so forth. Airgas will be opening this fall, a plant that'll make liquid argon, nitrogen, and so forth. Their drivers start at 75,000. So we all thought about submitting our resumes. In addition, our business park, I think we're really lucky. We see it as an asset. We do have a rail line, CP Rail, and the site that Opus has worked on and we'll talk about. As you can see kind of on the map here, the angle that runs right along where CP Rail is. Our existing business park is about 600 acres, and that's shown in kind of the bright yellow. We recently, through our comp plan update, had always guided about 300 acres south of 100th Street in our business park for additional industrial development. We did complete an AUAR that's outlined in the black and white line on the image. So it's over 1,700 acres that we included. We felt that was really important for businesses, and as developers are coming in and their business client, you know, it's speed to market. As Phil said, and you've heard from others, is we literally do want to get you in the ground as soon as possible. You know, there's the legal process we have to do for planning and zoning, which is that 60-day time clock maximum. But we want to do that and get you through your building permit review. We like to tout that the first project we did, we could do it in 4 months. The last one, I think we did in 3. And I think that's about what we did with the last one for renewal by Anderson. We really want to move as quick as possible. And that's about building a partnership with the developer and knowing their needs as well. Additionally, it's other partnerships. It's with the CDA, it's with Excel Energy, it's with the state. All those items really come together, and it is a team effort. In addition, I just have to mention, we do have another proposal in for 196 acres south of 100th Street from a developer out of the Kansas City area that is looking to do development. So they have not made official submittal yet, but we're really excited to see that take off and develop as well. So the Southeast Industrial Park, it was a former lumber yard. The land is owned by Hillcrest Development, and they contracted with Opus for design and construction. You guys completed a environmental assessment worksheet. And that was good to go. So with that and our AUAR, we also obtained the deed shovel-ready status. And what was your process for having that site out in the market? And did it kind of go slow and then finally interest pick up after a while?
Yeah, I think probably maybe to kind of recast that timeline, I think when we first sat down with Hillcrest to talk about kind of being the co-development or their development partner for that site, for those of you that are not familiar with Hillcrest, they're a very creative and talented development shop that in a lot of cases buys things that are people can't quite see the vision on, and they reposition them into something that's absolutely stunning. And when they acquired the former Lyman lumber site, that's not maybe quite their core competency of a ground up development. But what they did see is an alignment with Opus, and there's a long-standing history between our companies and collaborating on efforts that we could be a good partner for them. Kind of great partnerships are where you bring two people that have different skill sets together. If you brought two people together with the exact same skill sets, what's the point? So that, for starters, if you have a good partnership, and then it really was able to be accelerated by a great partnership with the city. And I truly mean that in the standpoint of when we came in in early 2015 and started talking about what could this be, we were welcomed with open arms at the city of Cottage Grove. In Cottage Grove, I think what I really appreciate from a developer's perspective is it's a very forward-looking process of saying, how can we support this? I've never heard the words, no, we can't do this. I've always heard, well, here's how we might be able to do that. And it starts by, we do quite an informal, what they call technical review, where we'll come in with a site plan saying, this is generally what we are thinking about doing. And all of the different elements within staff, planning, fire, engineering is all there to help kind of show us, okay, well, this is what you should be thinking about. And it really allows us to get to that level of how should we say, confidence that we know we have something that's going to work in a much more condensed manner. Secondly, when you're working out just a single plan and you're not spending a whole bunch of time with designing pipes and whatnot, it's a lot more economically efficient because you're not doing a bunch of redesign. Additionally, this is going to tie into a lot of the other kind of comments that we heard earlier, is that certainty of outcome for end users is kind of that common denominator. If there's a variable out there that we just don't know, it will, in a lot of cases, spook users, because that certainty of outcome and speed to market is paramount. And what we've elected to do is we did a voluntary environmental assessment worksheet for the property so that we could go ahead and verify there were no environmental issues. Secondly, then we went in and we got deed ready shovel certification, just to provide an external kind of tangible metric to say this site is about as ready as you can get. We just need to come in for building permit. And then the city even went so far as to say, well, why don't we go ahead and let's do a preliminary site plan application. It may not be perfect, but it gives us a pretty good idea of what it's going to be. And that also kind of helped feed the basis in for our EAW. But with those things, and we also even went in and developed some precedent images so that the city and the elected officials could see, what is this going to generally look like? It's not going to be exactly what the building's going to look like, but it's going to give you the vocabulary of how the buildings are going to look, how they're going to face. And then ultimately, we were ready to go when the first user showed up. And I think the first user that showed up was North Star Sheets. North Star Sheets creates, they're a corrugated sheet manufacturer. That's a really fancy word for cardboard.
Don't say cardboard to
yeah,
them, though.
but that's right. So they're a corrugated sheet manufacturer. Well, they needed a site that was ready to go. They had a speed to market, and they also needed rail service. And that was kind of the perfect trifecta of what this site offered for them. And in addition to that, their business, as you might imagine, has not slowed down through the pandemic. They are going nonstop. And if any of us look in our garages after birthday parties or Christmases or holidays, cardboard doesn't seem like it's going away. And I challenge anyone to find a more creative way to come up with something more efficient, because the building that we built and all of the investment that we made to create a box around that process for North Star Sheets pales in comparison to the investment that North Star Sheets made in the piece of machinery that creates the cardboard. And in its simplistic form, they need the rail because they bring in big reams of paper on rail cars. They put it inside the building, and then they take three pieces. One's the top, one's the bottom, and then the middle one gives you the crinkly piece in your cardboard, and out spits cardboard. And it is the most fascinating thing to watch. How they create all this cardboard. Therein lies, when we look at the conversations with the city, we had the original site plan application, and then we had a final user that came in, and it was close, but it wasn't exactly how the site plan was initially envisioned, just because of how their process had to be addressed in its adjacencies to how the rail connects with the building and how their process flow goes throughout the building. Here again is another testament to the city, where we sat down early. We explained what the needs were with the user by our side. Staff understood it. We creatively came to solutions. We went and talked with the elected officials about the reasons for why things had to be laid out where they did. And I think at the end of the day, we came up with a great solution that I think is no further evidence by not only the fact that North Star Sheets has a successful building and an operation that's moving forward, but they already, I think we've less than a year and a half, I think, from when we finished up there, we're already in and doing another expansion for them.
Oops, I went the wrong one.
Yep. So you can see, maybe just to give a quick, what you're looking at here, you've got in the blue box, the existing building that we originally built for North Star Sheets. And then we did an expansion. And what that expansion allows them to do, if you'll notice, you see the green line coming in off of the main Canadian Pacific rail line. That's the rail spur that comes into the site the rail spur goes all the way into the building. So their building size is dimensioned off of how many rail cars can they get under the roof. So in comes these large reams of paper with rail cars that go into it, and they can pull them off. This new expansion is not only going to allow them the ability to get additional rail cars in, there's actually a second spur that's going to be going into just that expansion facility to double up the amount of cars that they can get in there. And really it goes back to maybe that earlier comment I mentioned about that resiliency in the supply chain, making sure that, you know, that they were previously a just-in-time delivery where as soon as the paper showed up, it was getting put into production, it was going out, and their goal, I don't know exactly what it was, but their goal was not to have a tremendous amount of static inventory. Well, they quickly have figured out in the pandemic arena that they do need to create more resiliency and have more capacity. So really the expansion itself is really just to provide additional opportunities for storage of paper rolls so that they can meet those supply chain demands and surges that they have when it comes to cardboard manufacturing, corrugated sheet manufacturing, excuse me.
And I would tell cities that are new to industrial, you know, don't be afraid of the semi-trailer parking. It is part of the business. It's accessory. And I know a lot of cities, ooh, storage of trucks and trailers, you know, but there's screening and landscaping that could be done. But we all want our Amazon orders and, you know, our shoe orders from DSW or whatnot. So it is part of the business and part of the industry. And they can park the trailers in a nice order because oftentimes it's logoed. So it's part of their business too. Phil, are you finding, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, and maybe it's worth just talking a little bit about going back to the relationship. I would submit to your point that, you know, having that working dialogue and the ability to have an open, kind of transparent communication of what we're ultimately looking to achieve and recognizing the needs of the business. And then how can we be creative about solutions? And I think you mentioned the trailer parking and I glossed over that, but you can see in the red kind of somewhat a square where there's the additional trailer parking that we provided, you know, the whole idea being that, you know, the adjacency and the continued connectivity to the primary core business needs to be preserved. And we were able to flex what I would argue is a little bit of a challenge piece of real estate. It's kind of narrow, not a lot you can do with it, but it's actually a pretty good use for trailer parking. What you don't get to see on this, though, is that immediately to the bottom of that page is the Hamlet Park, which is a wonderful community park that the city of Cottage Grove and all the residents get to go out and enjoy. And it's hard to see in this graphic, but there's a fair amount of topography where the site sits higher above where the park is. But what we were able to do is we were able to work in collaboration with the city to create a lot of visual vegetative screening that's going to be not only seasonal here because fall's around the corner and pretty soon the white stuff's going to be flying.
Don't say that.
So we have a good mix of evergreens as well as deciduous trees that are in there. But in addition to that, prior to Hillcrest acquiring the property from Lyman had gone through and they'd taken out all the trees in preparation for their lumber yard. Ironic, it's a lumber yard that's kind of almost self-fulfilling that they took all of the trees out. But they had basically a tree dedication fund that we assumed basically with the acquisition. Well, those dollars then are being targeted to not only enhance, the aesthetic for the community of Cottage Grove, but specifically are targeted in that little triangular box that you see outside of that red triangle, where we're going to go ahead and a lot of those dollars are being targeted to further enhance and beautify that common line between the business park and Hamlet Park that's immediately adjacent to it, that I think is a great creative way that we can be thoughtful in utilizing what we're obligated to deliver and want to deliver, to be respectful of our adjacent users, but then on top of that, give those proceeds and target those to further enhance it on the public side. And that really kind of, I think, is built through that shared cooperation and collaboration that we have with the community of Cottage Grove, because it further enhances the job creation as well as then just making North Star Sheets being more successful, which in turn is going to drive more importing. And again, I think in to tie a bow on this, what we find is these decisions that groups are making today, the sophistication level of labor analytics and being able to go out and find that information is a huge deciding factor. The days of just saying, well, we have to come in, we have to be close to where does the CEO live and where's the airport at and where are the amenities at? Those matter. I'm not minimizing that, but the availability of labor and the sophistication of how groups are looking at where they can draw labor from, I think has very quickly risen to the top. Amazon picks their locations because of a variety of elements, and one of them I think is a very big driver is the availability of labor, because you could be right next to the freeway, you could have great access, but if you can't get your labor, it will not be successful.
And we're lucky we can kind of pull a lot of our workers in our business park also come from Wisconsin. So, you know, we can pull from Wisconsin as well. Just like Forest Lake mentioned, they can pull from central Minnesota. We can pull workers from Wisconsin, which has been great as well. Rail, how is rail doing with industrial users? Are you seeing an interest in bringing in raw product that way?
So it's a great question. And I'd summarize it like this. If your core business strategy was going to be, I want to buy up every industrial guided rail serve site there is, I would caution that that market is not nearly as deep as some of the other markets as it relates to industrial, where, you know, you're really looking back to that good access to labor. However, if you do need rail, a la North Star Sheets, then it's invaluable. So I don't want to misrepresent that it does not matter. North Star Sheets would not be at this location absent the rail. I mean, that's just a fundamental reality that there's no denying. Did we see a tremendous amount of activity because of the rail? We saw more groups that were looking for rail service for sure, but I would caution that depth of the market is somewhat more minimal.
Okay.
However, I do think that as we look at the resiliency within the supply chains, I do think that rail serve sites will continue to garner more and more interest. And a lot of it, though, also has to go back to what are you ultimately doing, right? Big reams of paper work really well on big rail cars.
Right.
If you're doing precision medical manufacturing, that may not necessarily be a rail car type application that's going to be as applicable.
Exactly. We have another user just further to the east of North Star Sheets called Up North Plastics. And they bring in their plastic pellets. They make your plastic boat covers, or if you drive by a cornfield, you see the rolls wrapped in plastic. They make that. Previous to the pandemic, they did a major expansion. So if you buy your garbage bags from Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, they could be made at the facility in Cottage Grove. So they doubled their workforce. And seeing the state here, we've taken advantage of MIF and JCF as well. So that's a great partnership. We've offered that. We have additional sites within our business park available that are represented by brokers. We have 3 that are represented by the city. The landowner, as he always tells me, doesn't want to get on a tractor anymore. Our business park was formerly a farm field, and we have those shovel ready, as well as on Excel's website for real estate. So the partnership with Opus has been great. You're also doing CAP Industries.
That's correct. And maybe just before we jump to CAP, I guess what I'd also want to say, you know, sometimes the project that we delivered with Renewal by Anderson was a 350,000 square foot expansion to their existing plant. And they called it the Value Add Center, because what that ultimately allowed Renewal by Anderson to do is have more inventory and fewer touches for some of their customized inventory. Because if you look at their business line, again, I mean, one of the fascinating things about industrial, right? Sometimes you see it as just a big rectangle. How exciting can it be? Well, it's amazing to see how businesses work. And Renewal by Anderson, I think, I'll never forget when we first sat down with their meeting, the president, Paul Batalden, said, you have to realize the business line that we're in is we're a mass produced custom window manufacturer. I mean, if there's ever an oxymoron where it's custom, but they have to mass produce it. So you think about it, how does that work? Well, they do it, and they do a fabulous job. And one of those reasons is because they were able to concentrate and get a lot of adjacencies with their existing facility and the new value add center. So they had a lot more inventory that's available to meet those surges in order. And the reason I wanted to bring that up was because the execution with a very certain timeline, and the state was involved as well on behalf of Renewal by Anderson, to acquire the property from the business park in Cottage Grove was very seamless. And I use that as maybe a confidence or testament to say, anytime you have multiple variable parties, I mean, one of the first things businesses ask for is, do you own the real estate? Because if you don't own the real estate, then that immediately draws a flag up. The fact that it was city-owned, Renewal by Anderson and Opus had the highest degree of confidence that there was not going to be any issues as far as the acquisition of that additional acreage for their project, and it worked out fantastic. Talking about Cap Industries, so one of the unique things is as Opus, we, as I mentioned earlier, a vertically integrated developer. We have three legs of the stool: the real estate side where I sit, we have the construction side, and then the design side. Sometimes that three legs of the stool, they can remove the developer very quickly, and they can say, well, we can build for somebody else. So Cap Industries is a longstanding client of Opus's that really they are somewhat in a similar business line as Opus in that they buy and develop industrial real estate in this case, they're doing a speculative industrial real estate project that they're building a building without a named tenant. And a lot of people always say, well, why would you ever want to build a building without a tenant? We ironically are just finishing up our entitlements and getting ready to close on a project in the city of Minneapolis for a speculative industrial project. And the amount of times that we had to explain to staff that we're building a building, we don't know how many cars or trucks are going to be there, was quite a perplexing scenario for them. Is they said, well, how do you know you have enough parking? Well, we've done this a few times, but trust us, I think this will work. But we had to ultimately educate through extensive traffic study analysis and showing them what the general market parameters are going to be, that we did in fact have a site that would work. That's the same case here. And frankly, the city of Cottage Grove is very understanding of, we understand how you're looking at doing a speculative project. We'd love to do projects where we already know who the tenants are, but regrettably, the speed to market and the dynamic need for new space just doesn't afford most users, much less we talked earlier about, even if you said, I could get you approvals in 2 days, well, I can't get steel for another kind of 6 months. So even if a user showed up saying, I need inventory, or I just got a new contract that I need to move I need additional space or additional storage area, I can't even deliver it in 6 months right now with how long the timeline is for material. So if you don't have inventory up, you can't meet a lot of those needs. Hence the reason why we've seen such a propensity of additional speculative industrial development. Cap Industries, I think this is one of three at roughly about 120,000 plus or minus square feet.
Yeah.
So that's going up right now. And that will be, I think, a very good indicator as to seeing how, I mean, it's a little bit of I always try to say, we don't want to be the first one in per se, because they're going to go and kind of prove the market. And a lot of people say, well, how do you know there's a demand for spec development in Cottage Grove? Well, part of the reality is nobody's put up a spec building yet.
No.
This has the visibility. And I think because we've talked a little bit about Southeast Industrial Park, and the reality being, you can't really do a spec rail serve project because the way the rail interacts with the building for each user is different. But a spec industrial building, I think, will be well received in this community because there just hasn't been a lot of other options. And a lot of users at 20, 30, 40,000 square feet, that cost of entry for new construction at that scale could make it somewhat cost prohibitive. But if they can be a tenant in a multi-tenant building, just that economy of scale enables them to get in for a much more palatable occupancy cost for them. And also, quite frankly, gives a lot of users, in the case of Cap, where they would have that potential ability to expand within the building over the years. So they may sign up initially for 20,000 feet, and then 4 or 5 years, they don't have to build an addition. They just have to knock down a wall and move it over, which that's a lot faster than building a new building.
I know as a city, we're excited to have that. We get calls all the time from smaller businesses, more maybe startup that doesn't have the deep pockets to build their own facilities. So to have this spec building, I think will do great wonders for the community. It also helps with our commercial side of businesses, the retail aspect. That's also something our elected officials want to see more of. And your places like 3M and Renewal have lunchrooms. We want more people to spend more times in our restaurants and so forth. So I did place sheets out in the lobby that lists the available sites that we do have in Cottage Grove, including the one left over here in the Southeast Industrial Park. So I can put people in contact with Phil and with the brokers who represent the site. But we'd be happy to have you. And happy to give you tours of the industrial businesses as well. We found, like people said, what is exactly an industrial use? People think it's like, I always joke, the glue manufacturer with the horses coming into the building and then, your thing of glue. It's not that anymore. That's not the industrial that we're talking. Like I said, it's your Amazon, it's your DSW, it's your Chewy. Everything has some sort of industrial aspect to it. So with that, we can take any questions.
Yeah, Chris.
What's the feeling on the cross dock and will be used, lots of trailer storage? What's your feeling on that?
The question was about Cottage Grove's, our feeling about cross dock type businesses. We're definitely open to it. It just kind of depends how it lays out on the site. It's something that we would work with you and the business in terms of, what's the surrounding uses and landscaping and that type of thing, but we're not opposed to it at all. Perfect example of trailer storage. We have many of our industrial businesses that have trailer storage as kind of an accessory component to the main business. We just don't allow it as the only use on the site. We do want to see a building.
And I might just kind of maybe piggyback off the quick comment about cross dock. So maybe just cross dock facilities, basically docks on two sides where product comes in, it goes through a process, goes out the other side. Or in some cases, they just really don't have much need for any office and you can put a demising line down the middle and you have docks just on both sides. We do a lot of that type of development in Phoenix, in Indianapolis, in Chicago. It frankly isn't all that common here in the Twin Cities market, but if there's one trend we're maybe starting to see is this larger format need for industrial. There's a project going up right now. I think it's cross-dock in Shakopee at the former Cretex site that rumor has it might already be off the market because somebody's already signed a lease for the whole thing. But it would not be surprising to see some more of that type of product coming into the market. Generally speaking, the Twin Cities, 250,000 square feet, kind of a big building for this market. In contrast to some of the other larger distribution markets, they're all on 1 million square feet. We put up 1 million, 1 million, 2 million, 4 square foot facilities as Opus in some of our other markets. It's no secret. Clayco has already announced that they might put up 1 million square feet spec up in Dayton Rogers. North Point out of Kansas City, they're going to put up larger format, 400,000 square foot facilities is what they're proposed, I think, down in Cottage Grove. It's probably going to be a trend that we'll maybe start to see more and more of as users start needing those larger footprints. Again, it ties back to some of those comments of influence of e-commerce. I don't know quite what the statistics are, but as we've seen, e-commerce is now making upwards of 20% of all retail transactions. The logistical supply and footprint that's required to substantiate those needs is huge. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, the supply chain resiliency, having more inventory available and not be reliant on choke points within the supply chain. I think we're going to continually see that manifested throughout our market because we're certainly seeing it on the coastal markets. And I don't think it's a huge epiphany to start suggesting that what we see on the coast will start migrating their way here to the Midwest. Chicago will be probably the lead in our kind of like markets that will first experience that.
And we look to Phil and so forth when we work with different developers and, you're in it day to day as opposed to myself, So when we hear the need for cross docks and so forth, we're open to that, or the change in height of ceilings for industrial buildings. That's important for us to learn as well. So it's definitely an education, and that partnership really helps to know what businesses want now and in the future. Guess we can go to lunch.
Make sure we get all our 4 hours for those of us that need credits.
You
I think we're probably good. Jeff should probably give us the green light here any minute now.
Yeah, Jeff's not here, but you're good at 11:50. Technically, you have to have 50-minute hours for continuing education, and it is 11:52. You're clear.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.